Hello everyone, and welcome to This Nintendo Life, episode 241. My name is NBZ, and I am eternally in a frost-ridden land. Written by God, I guess, for how cold everything fucking is right now. There was fog the other day, but I couldn't see like 2 feet in front of me. I was walking to work, and I was like, "What? Where am I now? Am I like in some kind of mystical land? Am I in an
N64
somewhere?
game that can't render properly?"
Pretty much, you know, like that was the vibe. I was playing Turok essentially. The dinosaurs were somewhere, and I couldn't see them, and they were going to jump out at me.
But the frame rate was great.
The frame rate was great. I could see everything, you know. As we all know, the human eye sees in frame rates. You know, that's a good fun thing. Yeah, I don't know. It's been very, I would say, unseasonably cold for London, as opposed to I would expect this in Scotland. But I don't know. It's just the effects of you know, everything falling apart globally. So I don't know. How's it been up there, Bally?
Supposedly, climate change means that Europe and specifically the UK, our winters are going to become more like Northeast North America. So like,
wow,
you know, New York, Toronto, that kind of, where they get the really hot summers and the really cold winters is what our natural summer-winter cycle is going to become more like.
Just going to be more intense on every level.
And judging by last summer and this winter, that's certainly the case. So that's fun.
Yeah. You know what, I'm fine with fucking freezing cold. You know, I was born in the cold in December, you know, that I'm built for this, I would say. But when it comes to the summer, just fuck that.
I am totally with you. I am totally with you. I can handle the cold so much better than the heat. So much better. But yeah. You know what, MBZ? When there were rumors of a potential Nintendo Direct, I tweeted, well, seeing as we're going to be recording episode 241 like this weekend, or like next weekend at the time, there's no way in hell that a Direct would come out the week ahead of us actually recording. No. So I said, these rumors are false, they're not going to happen. And it happened. So that was a pleasant surprise. And it's actually worked out with our recording schedule for once. So thank you, Nintendo.
Yeah, shout out to Nintendo for listening to us for once, and, you know, providing very, very good timing for us to, you know, watch it, have lots of thoughts about it. In fact, play some stuff from the Direct that we can talk about. So yeah, lots of good stuff. Bally, tell us what's going to happen on today's show.
For the first segment, we're going to run through everything that was covered in that Nintendo Direct. And then for the second segment, we're going to talk about the games that we have been playing, including a couple of demos from that Direct.
Indeed. Yeah, I know that we like to stick to tradition here and like usually be like, well, we're always going to do what we've been playing first. But, you know, when it comes down to it, I know everybody listening is like, I just want to hear them talk about the Direct first. And that's me with other podcasts. So I assume it's you with this podcast, you listening right now.
But we also have timestamps if you want to skip ahead to any part you want. You know, we've got that there as well.
You know, you could do the machete order of this episode, which is like do the traditional TNL of like, listen to what we were playing, then come back and listen to the Nintendo Direct. If you want to do that, you know, go ahead. And if you're a true hardcore fan, that's what you're gonna do. But we're gonna be here doing some Nintendo Direct stuff to begin with. So yeah, I guess let's just get into it then.
We should shout out our survey one last time.
Yes, before we do that though, we have a survey ongoing, which is going to be closing out the day after this show goes out. So if you haven't done it yet, please take a couple of minutes of your time to go check it out. It'll be in the description. It will be in the show notes, on our Twitter account. It's on Discord, all those places. So that would be very, very helpful. And lots of people have already done it. So we just, if there's any stragglers out there who are like, hey, forgot to do it, was going to do it, and last reminder here, there you go check it out. Survey is there for you to do. But let's get into the Nintendo Direct that happened on, what was the date, like the 9th of February or something? 8th of February?
Like that, yeah.
I can't remember. It was a few days ago now. It's all hazy, you know, forgotten all of it. But we're going to be talking about it. Bally, give me your overall top-level thoughts on this Nintendo Direct. How did it strike you?
With my Bally hat on, it was very strong, but all the stuff that is most, for me, that I'm most excited about, I probably already knew about, but it was very nice for a lot of those things to get more information, like release dates for Pikmin and stuff like that. Like, that was very exciting and really good to see. And then from a more general perspective, if you're into your demos, if you're into your DLC, if you're into your JRPGs, your JRPG collections, I think this Direct hit it out the park, and I think there will be a lot of fans, Nintendo fans out there, specifically of those three things. And I come in that camp a bit where I'm very excited for Octopath Traveler 2 and stuff like that. So like, I think for that audience, it was incredibly strong. But maybe for my personal tastes, I maybe needed like one more thing that was a big surprise to make it absolute top tier. But it was just off the top tier for me personally. It was very strong.
Yeah, I mean, I am one of those people. So for me, it really did knock it out of the park. There were lots of things here for me. I think especially because the DLC that was being talked about, a lot of it ties in with games that I care about, right? Which, to be honest, I don't know if I will play the Fire Emblem DLC. I will definitely play the Xenoblade. We'll get to the fucking Xenoblade DLC. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of stuff in here that is for the nerds. And I think we say this every time when it comes to Nintendo Directs, but like, look, if you're not into niche RPGs, then there's always going to be stuff here that is going to gloss over for you, right? Because that's what they tend to do. Like, it's very Japanese focused in terms of third-party support these days, especially. Like, it's been a while, it feels like, since there's been like strong Western third-party support in Nintendo Directs. Almost always Japanese companies. And there are a few themes, as you said, to this Direct. One of them being a bunch of DLC. I would say another theme is detective games. We have multiples of those. Another theme is like nostalgia for the era of GameCube and DS, basically, and kind of pre that with the GBA and Game Boy stuff. And then also a weird theme is Level 5 exists again? Question mark? Like, what? Out of nowhere? Which is a very interesting thing. So, yeah, lots of good stuff. I really thought this was a great Nintendo Direct and spoke to my taste particularly, but also had, I think, a lot of interesting things that speak to where Nintendo are at the moment, which is basically, look, we've got a few big things coming, but we're going to carry the rest of this platform's life with collections and remasters and older games that people have been asking for a very long time, and they are finally delivering them and putting stuff out. And I think also just Nintendo have tended to be a company that leads the way when it comes to shadow drops and just putting stuff out straight away, but this was one of those presentations where they dropped so many things that I had anxiety about what to do first, right? Like, there was just so much stuff happening that I'm like, I don't know what to do with my Switch right now, because I could download like 6 different things that all dropped today, and that's really cool. But yeah, it was very much I don't know, too much things, too many things to choose from. A bunch of riches. So. Anyway, let's just jump in, Bally. Let's start talking about things that we cared about, and we'll go back and forth on this. So, where do you want to start with this Nintendo Direct? What's the thing you want to talk about first?
Let's jump in with some Pikmin 4, and they opened the Direct with this as well. I was so confident this game wasn't coming out this year. I think the fact they didn't show any video game footage, like gameplay last time, like I did think we'd see gameplay at some point for Pikmin in 2023, but I did not think it would be in the February Direct. I thought it might be later. So the fact that they do a pretty extensive gameplay and then drop a release date, I was very impressed. I think that visually Pikmin 4 is looking very cool. I think mechanically we've got like ice Pikmin. They're pretty cool. Like they kind of like freeze over these big plains of water, because traditionally in Pikmin, the plane of water means, right, you need your blue water Pikmin, and that's how you traverse that area. And or you have like your pink flying Pikmin, for example. Right. That's the 2 ways of traversing water.
And you have to kind of like leave the rest of your crew behind, essentially, right? Right. They can't come with you. And there are now multiple ways, it seems. They were like, look at this water. This is a pain in the ass. How about we find multiple ways of overcoming it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
And that's cool. Like, and there's like this new dog that your new character, who's not Olimar or any other character, I believe, that we've seen that you play as, you can like ride on this dog. And so like mechanically there's a couple of new things there, but by and large it does feel like it's going to be very close to Pikmin and like Pikmin 3 more generally. So I don't think it's doing anything to completely rewrite the formula, but I don't think that's what this game was ever going to be aiming for. So I mean, I'm very excited. It's a very, very long time since we've had an original Pikmin. So the fact that it's coming July 21st is such a bonus. So I was very excited by this and then opening the Direct with it.
Yeah, I think that release date is one that you're like, well, that's not going to get delayed, right? Like, even if it does get delayed, it will be delayed still into 2023, so it's going to be a this year game regardless. And yeah, they showed pretty extensive amounts of gameplay, which to me says that this thing is locked in, and this thing is probably has been done for a little while as well. And in traditional Nintendo fashion, they just kind of sit on it until they think it is a good time marketing-wise to release it, or like calendar-wise to release it. And yeah, I'm really excited for it. You know, I got into Pikmin having played Pikmin 3 on Wii U at your recommendation. I think maybe I borrowed your disc for Pikmin 3. I can't remember. And I loved it. I thought it was a fantastic game. And of all the like kind of the traditionally Bally games that I have gotten into, I think Pikmin is the number one for me.
Oh, it's the number one. Wow.
Yeah, because like
above Tropical Freeze.
Ooh, well,
it's tight. They're both pretty.
Yeah,
they're both pretty great.
Those are two of the best Wii U games, right? Like on top of each other. I would say as a series, though, right? Because like Tropical Freeze is like an individual game. Because I was into the Donkey Kong games in some senses, but yeah, I would say like as a series, I just wasn't really, because you had Pikmin on GameCube, and I never really got that into it. And I played it at your house a little bit, but we never really. Like, I never sat down to really give it the time of day, and then when I did, I think Pikmin 3 was the right game to do it with as well, because it was like a refinement of so much of what had happened in the series up to that point. And look, the Wii U was a perfect platform for it. As awkward as it could be of like having the gamepad and the Wii remote and everything, it is like the best use of motion controls I've ever seen in a game, and like such a smooth, streamlined experience from that kind of idea of moving around the place and like controlling multiple different parties. I wonder if that plays into things again of like switching between different characters to control different groups.
I hope so. I think that was really well executed on Wii U with the gamepad, and the way that the pad sat on your lap, and like you go between the three characters, and just kind of really allowed the kind of Metroidvania puzzles, working out how to get to the next space, felt a lot more in depth and thorough through that method, which I enjoyed.
Yeah.
I did think this trailer also revealed that they're going back to something from Pikmin 2, which is like the dungeons in that game. So the dungeons are basically like, it's basically like level, you keep going further into the earth, and then there's like some big boss at the bottom of the dungeon, essentially.
Kind of roguelike stuff back in Pikmin 2.
It's a little bit roguelike, and it's a lot, they're generally more combat focused and less puzzle focused,
right?
And they can get pretty tough, and you kind of like get all your Pikmin, and then you just take on the dungeon, and then because you don't have the ability to gain more Pikmin like you do in the overworld, that's kind of where the challenge is. It's like you really need to protect your Pikmin, otherwise you're gonna run that Pikmin, game over, and go back to the surface kind of thing. So I think it seems like they're incorporating something similar to that in this game, judging by just the feel of the world and going down. Like you could see that there was like a dungeon style area, so that'd be cool. Because Pikmin 3 I think was maybe on the easy side a little bit. I mean, there were some tough bosses in there, but like I think that if Pikmin 4 goes for the more dungeon style thing in aspects, I think that could be cool.
Yeah, or even having them to be optional things, right, that you can go after if you want, but you don't have to engage with in the main story, I think would be a nice approach to it, potentially. But yeah, we'll see where they go with that. For me, the biggest difference was the camera perspective shift, which Miyamoto had talked about before, of like, we're going to be a bit closer to the ground or whatever, and it really does feel like that. I get more of a Toy Story feel here, like and It Takes Two feel of like tiny person in big world, and really from that perspective this time. And like the big boss they showed with the giant clomping feet did feel more intimidating and larger and more like almost Shadow of the Colossus-esque than Pikmin has previously done, because Pikmin has previously had a bit more of a zoomed out, slightly isometric camera. This to me feels like a good enough difference to like make it stand out, but also makes me wonder, like, does that mean there's less of a tactical focus and more of an action focus? I'm not sure like how that makes it kind of the adapting to this new camera style, because a lot of Pikmin before was kind of taking your crew and kind of putting them into different sections of the army and just being able to take, okay, I'm going to take this one here and this one there and like spread them out and that sort of stuff. And you could do that more easily from a zoomed out perspective, from like a, it's like a Total War game or whatever, right? You can see everybody and you're kind of like commanding them in a sense. And if they are all kind of close towards you and around you, and you can't kind of separate them like that in an easy way, then it makes me feel like they're going in a more action direction, maybe even a more like Tinykin-esque direction, where it's more focused on just like they automatically get attacked to people depending on, you don't even have to choose between them, that type of thing. I don't think Nintendo would go in that direction, but I wonder if that camera shift down lower to the ground changes the approach from a gameplay perspective. Yeah. So
it's looking cool. There's nothing overly surprising in this trailer, I thought, but it was still looking very cool, and it's just amazing and awesome that we're getting a new Pikmin game in 2023.
Yeah, it's great. I hope it is the best-selling Pikmin game. It has to be, right? It must be.
Did the Pikmin 3 re-release on Switch do okay?
I don't know. I've not heard much about how well that sold. I imagine it probably did fine. I think like the only Wii U game that did poorly as a Switch re-release that I've heard of was Tokyo Mirage Sessions, which flopped on Wii U, flopped on Switch as well.
Forgot that came over.
Yeah. So that's one of those rare games where like the Switch effect did not take place, and it just, which is kind of shocking because that game is basically Persona in some way. It's nowhere near as good as Persona, but that audience is kind of ravenous. So I'm a little surprised. Maybe it's just the name of it is just so obscure and nobody knows what the fuck it is. So I totally get why people would skip over it. But I think Pikmin 3 did at least decently. And I am wondering about like control schemes in that, right? Because as we've said, like the controls in Pikmin 3 are just sublime. So can they make something that feels really good that adapts to this new system in Pikmin 4? I hope so. I like that dog. I saw a tweet someone put out was like, do Nintendo just not know that dogs have noses because every dog they make doesn't have a nose?
That's so true. I remember the dog in Yoshi's Island that you ride on and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, because that dog is also in Yoshi's Woolly World as well, right?
Yeah. It looks very similar to this dog in Pikmin 4, actually, and doesn't have a nose.
Yeah, exactly. My favorite part of this trailer was you jump on the dog and he's like a little boat that takes you across the water. Like the way he just like plops in and the Pikmin all like go around the dog, and like it was just very adorable and just very well animated, and like you can see the charm is on full display for Pikmin 4. So
massively.
Yeah, it might not be a complete reinvention of the series, but I think they're going to add enough new and interesting things to keep it fresh and make it feel like a fun experience. And I don't need that much new for Pikmin. I think it's already a great formula to begin with, so just definitely. A bit more of that sounds good to me.
Great.
So, very much looking forward to that.
What's your next pick, MBZ?
Look, let's just go in. Let's just do it because everyone wants to hear us talk about The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom.
I thought you were going to talk about Omega Strikers, but okay. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, my favorite game from the presentation, Omega Strikers. Bally, did you know you can pre-order this free-to-play game today? That's what they said during the presentation.
It's going to be the next fortnight. But
it's going to be big. It's going to be big stuff, man. So, Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. I think we both came away from the presentation, I'm going to say a little cold on this trailer.
A little.
I was initially anyway. And I think there's just a weird... The marketing around this game has been super strange for me, from the sense of it's been so long and it's been so snippeted, like you think about how much footage total we've seen of this game. It's probably up to this point, it's probably under 6 minutes, I would say, and that's over the course of 4 years. And so like it's really been like dribbled out in bits and pieces, and we slowly have been piecing together what we think this game might be. And my expectation was, look, we're 3 months away from launch. They've done no big marketing on this game whatsoever. They have to come big with this, right? They have to have an end of direct trailer that's like 3-4 minutes long, that dives into the core premise of the game, what's really happening, maybe even doing a treehouse section at some point, like that is what I need to see from this game. And they give us another like minute and a half trailer that shows us some stuff, but then still doesn't really tell us about the core of this game. And so I came away from it being like, okay, look, I'm still very excited for Zelda. I'm just still a little... I just don't really know what to expect. And maybe that's a good thing, right? Like, in many senses, it's nice to go into a game like this fresh. But Zelda is that one series from Nintendo where I just want to see more of it all the time. Like, just that entire treehouse section at E3 when they did Breath of the Wild, I watched fucking everything. And it's because I was ravenous for more information about this game. And that's kind of how I feel here, is like, it feels like they need to do a full-blown direct that's like, okay, we're 2 months away from launch. Here's what this game is about. Here's what you're going to be doing. That kind of stuff. And not spoiling things, but like at least giving us, providing a bit more context for what's going to be happening.
And
what would be nice.
I mean, the logic says, and not that Nintendo ever go by logic, but like the logic is that the February Direct will get a lot more views and be aimed at a wider audience that could then be interested in Tears of the Kingdom than any specific Direct focused on Zelda down the line. You know, it's strange that, sure, they might do a Treehouse Live in, say, I don't know, when's the game coming out? May, in April. And that's great. And maybe they'll reveal a lot more about like the gameplay and the initial areas or something. Who knows? But the fact that they didn't do something a little more detailed here, I was surprised by.
Yeah.
Especially when you juxtapose that with what they did with Breath of the Wild, where, I mean, we still had the 4 years of intermittent trailers, and then there was that weird gameplay at the Game Awards, but then eventually they said for E3, you know, towards E3 2016, they're like, right, we're just focusing on Breath of the Wild, and we've not even revealed the Switch yet, but that doesn't matter. We're just going to talk about Breath of the Wild. They completely spoiled most of, if not the entirety of the Great Plateau, on purpose, because they knew that the game had so much more beyond the Great Plateau, that the Great Plateau was just this fantastic, it was like designed for a Treehouse Live, like the Plateau. It's just so good at understanding the mechanics, understanding how this game works, and then just leaving the whole mystery of the rest of the world. And I guess that's hard to do with a sequel that's based in the same world with Tears of the Kingdom. I get that. But
right.
They really are going for these really dark themed vibes on almost all of these trailers, at least for large portions of the trailers. And it's very much this feeling of like, Breath of the Wild is so hopeful and bright, and sure, it's an apocalyptic world, but it's still very positive, and all the trailers leading up to it more or less were like very bright and positive, and all these trailers are so dark, and it's, you know, it's Ocarina versus Majora, you know, it's like light versus dark, Wind Waker versus Twilight Princess, light versus dark, you know, like there's they really want you to feel this kind of closed, uncomfortable feeling, and certainly this trailer made me feel uncomfortable. The more I watched of the trailer later, and the more people analyzed it, I got a lot more excited, and we can talk about totally. Aspects that were exciting, but like tonally it just feels so different from Breath of the Wild, and that's what made me feel uncomfortable and a little, not lacking, but a little disappointed is an overstatement, but I wanted a little bit more. And as you say, with it coming out so soon, it's not the great positive vibes I want coming into Zelda. And I'm sure I'm still going to love this game. It's going to probably still be my game of the year. It's probably still going to be just as good, if not better, than Breath of the Wild. But this trailer was weird.
It's really weird. Yeah, that's the thing it comes down to, is like it has a strange structure to it. Like it focuses, as you said, on kind of narrative. Like we presume we hear Ganondorf at the start of this trailer. I'm assuming played by Matthew Mercer, that the internet has figured out. And then as soon as I heard someone say that, I was like, oh, of course it fucking is. Like that's because I remember I was watching it the first time. I'm like, this is such a familiar voice. Who is this? And yeah, like if that is Matt Mercer playing Ganondorf, then I mean that's, you know, it's game of the year already, so don't need to do anything else. But yeah, there's a strange structure to it. There's a strange kind of weirdness, and then and then suddenly it's Banjo-Kazooie nuts and bolts, and everyone's like, what the fuck? What happened? I do love the idea that the entire Zelda team watched people play this on the internet and were like, those people who take magnets and make themselves fly through the sky, that's a cool idea. What if we just made a mechanic?
These people who make vehicles out of rocks, let's give them vehicles.
Totally. Like let's build this glitch / like pushing the boundaries of the physics of the world. Let's just actually give them the tools to do that this time, you know? And like I think it really opens up the possibility space of what you can do, because like, I mean, Breath of the Wild is just a physics playground. There's so much fun stuff you can do with the chemistry and physics of that game. And like providing even more tools, even more creativity that a player can have around those ideas with this, you know, making basically a machine that goes across the land that's basically a car, but it's like on a platform and stuff, and, you know, flying ships, and like the whole, I am very interested in how this game runs, because like flying through the sky on a giant platform with like all that stuff and loading in the entire, like it just it seems like a lot for the Switch to be doing, but if they can pull it off, then I mean, you know, tip to them, because it seems like an impossible task, and yeah, that's very cool.
I think the idea of having something in the world telling you that there's something you need to go to in the sky, and you more or less have a vague idea where in the sky it is. You've not been in the sky yet, and then the game suggests that, oh, there might be a wheel and like something to link to this to create a hot air balloon that might link to the, and you get like parts for a hot air balloon out of a bog using like your magnet thing or whatever.
Your arm
apparently. And then the idea that you then build a vehicle and then you take off in that vehicle and explore the skies and then discover, I don't know, a shrine or the next story beat or who knows what. You discover something in the sky that the game's been breadcrumbing you towards. Like, that sounds like, that's like what I would define as the next level of open world, like beyond Breath of the Wild. Like that, that feeling in Breath of the Wild where you have a general idea of where you want to go, and you just go and you explore things along the way, and there's all these mechanics and things in the way, like the idea that you can then do that but go into the sky and build the thing to get to the sky yourself, and you pull the parts out of like a bog like they showed in the trailer. Like, that is very exciting and is something no open world game has done so far to my knowledge. Like, that's really next level thinking in terms of where open world games can go and what you would expect from, you know, open world Zelda in 2023.
Yeah, and it feels like, once again, they're taking inspiration from other games and looking to places, I would say, outside the Japanese games industry, because this, to me, calls to mind games like Besiege, which is a game where you are building these contraptions to, you know, overcome these puzzles, and that's a very kind of you know, segmented game. It's not, you know, open or anything. You just have this, like, here's this challenge, build a machine that overcomes this challenge using your ingenuity and your engineering. Or you have something like Kerbal Space Program, where the entire concept is building a rocket that can go to the moon and can, you know, hold up through space and all that sort of stuff. Like, you have to have an integrity to the machine you're building, and as we see, like, clearly these are things built by a player and not predetermined by some sort of blueprint, right? Like, you can see kind of like the random, like, okay, it's just like a really big plank that's attached with these wheels, and you can see the kind of like the green goo that almost acts like adhesive in order to put all this stuff together. There is a creativity to that, which I think it's taking it to the next level of, like, okay, well, you can build these things and you can have fun with them, and you can build a game that overcomes specific puzzles by having to, you know, make something to do that. But now this is far more about, like, just pure traversal and getting around the space, and I wonder if that like, I don't think we've seen, oh no, we have, I was going to say, I don't think we've seen a horse, but we saw a horse multiple times in this trailer. I was going to say, do they take all the horses away and now you just have to, you know, vehicle build your way? But
yeah, that's what I want to know, is, like, what is the advantage of riding this tractor across Hyrule Field versus riding your horse? Like, what's the difference? Why do you need it to be the tractor? Like, maybe the tractor is a means of getting parts from one end of the map to the other, and then you use those same parts to make a hot air balloon that you then, or something like that. Who knows?
You can carry stuff, right? You can make a lorry where you just like, you can take stuff with you to the other side. You could also theoretically see it having, you know, what if it has weapons on the side, you know, like you can attach a gun or something to it, or like some kind of like weird spikes on the side that end up plowing through enemies, so you can just like run through enemies and they die as you kind of like go past them, essentially GTA, like with Breath of the Wild.
Or if you just like had a guardian head that you just plonked on the front and then you just go across, just
like a
laser all the enemies away.
Yeah, like there's a lot of that's the thing I think it makes it exciting, is there's a lot of possibility. And like, man, if the first game was certainly built for sharing on social media, this shit is gonna go wild. You are gonna see insane stuff, and I am so looking forward to that, because I think there's a level of creativity that you can have with this idea that, you know, I think is going to be great. I think it's going to be so much fun to mess around with and like share tips with each other, and like, that's the fun thing, is like, it's almost like Minecraft adjacent in like there's an engineering aspect to this, right? Like a real world application of balance and, you know, understanding of like where axles should go and that sort of stuff. Like, and I'm sure it won't get that super complicated, but it will get complicated to a point where, you know, you can make something that will just not really work, right? That will be possible, but there will be a fun kind of experimentation to it that I think.
And to be clear, like, we did see a truck / tractor / whatever. We saw a hot air balloon, and we saw a Green Goblin style like hovercraft kind of thing.
Literally a raft with a bunch of fans attached to it, and you can see it's not working perfectly because even in that shot it's like leaning towards the ground, so at any moment Link could just fall off it, you know, like there's an instability, there's an unpredictability to it that I think makes that stuff fun, right?
And
awesome.
I'm intrigued, like if you've spent a good couple of hours getting the parts for that hovercraft and then you fall off the hovercraft mid-air and then the hovercraft flies to God knows where, the other side of the map, like what's the process for getting it back and getting the pieces back? Does it take another 2 hours, or is there some sort of reset, or like does the green goo teleport it back to you? I don't know. I'm intrigued to see how they bring it all together.
Can you do like what you do with horses, where you go somewhere and register the vehicle, essentially?
I'd like to register this hovercraft.
Yeah, exactly. And then you can just, you know, bring it back wherever you want, which might be a way around it. But yeah, you know, is degradation built into these pieces as well, God. Right? Like people could be even more mad. But yeah, no, that'd be very cool. Yeah, and there are snippets of story stuff here, as we mentioned. Like there's the Ganondorf stuff. There's also Zelda saying a few things, you know. There's a mysterious figure that Link kind of like holds hands with. Who is that? Zelda? Is that someone else? And it really, this whole trailer, I think a part of my disappointment was this whole fucking trailer, they are baiting the hell out of us. They are leading up to a moment which looks like they're gonna say, okay, Zelda's playable, right? Like I felt it the whole trailer, and then the last shot is, oh, she's falling down a hole again and Link's reaching out to her.
Yeah,
like,
it's
all right.
It's the second trailer they've baited us for that stuff. And okay, so are we leaning on the side that Zelda will be playable in this game?
Oh my God. The thing is that after the presentation, they put out official artwork of Zelda, and she's holding basically a Sheikah slate, right?
Right. And so are you saying you think she will be playable?
Look, all the signs say yes, but it's Nintendo, so no, right? Like, that's where my brain is at. Is like,
okay, let's pretend a world where we know that Zelda is playable.
Yeah.
Do Nintendo reveal that in marketing before the game's release?
It's a good question, isn't it? Like, could it be a Raiden situation with Metal Gear Solid 2, right? Like, nobody knows about it, and then they're like, what the fuck? Like, that there is a lot of that stuff. Like, even with God of War Ragnarok last year, which I won't say specifically, but like, you know, there are certain things that they don't put in marketing so that when the player gets to the game, they can be surprised by it, right?
Right.
So the question is that the case here, right? Like, will it be that you're 40 hours in and all of a sudden you're playing a Zelda, right? Like, I don't know. Like, is that possible?
Yeah.
Maybe.
I think they will reveal she is playable before the game comes out.
Okay.
I think so. I don't think they can resist the marketing beat. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
And she might not even be playable. And we're all just like, well, they've not released it as a marketing beat, but now we're playing the game. And then we finished the game 150 hours later and we didn't play a minute of Zelda.
Yeah.
Who knows? Yeah. But I think they would be too tempted by the marketing beat to not go for it. And they're enjoying teasing it for now.
They are just teasing this underground, right? Like, that's the thing that keeps getting teased constantly. And there's been so much focus placed on the sky. It feels like there's not as much focus being placed on like what's going to happen when she falls through the earth, right? Like, I am very curious about how that will play into things, and even if that is a thing, it could not be. It could be something we're just kind of creating from our own kind of like expectations. So I don't know. I tend to agree that, like, I think we were both quite cool on this, but after watching it some more, after watching people do breakdowns, analysis, that sort of stuff, I am very excited still. Obviously, you know, it's the next Zelda game. I'm always going to be excited about it no matter what. I just wish that their marketing was a bit more aligned and, you know, had a bit more direction to it. And, you know, maybe that's the thing, as you said, like, they don't need to sell this game to people because people know what the game is at a base level.
I think that they're enjoying being weird and dark about it, clearly, and that's fine. It's just the vibes we got from the Switch reveal trailer. It was the Japanese January one, right?
That's what I wanted. I wanted that equivalent trailer for this.
But then you watch it back, like part of the reason that trailer was so good is it was bright, it was positive, it was hopeful, it was bright vibes, positive music, and this trailer had none of that. Even though it revealed a ton of like cool stuff. It's just it makes you realize how much vibes in a trailer can make you feel good about a game versus whether the game will actually be good or really great or not anyway. But
I think it's a structure thing as well, because like the music in that original trailer is amazing.
Yeah.
Like the way that it all builds up narratively, like it's that is, in my opinion, the greatest trailer ever made. So you know, it's going to be hard to get close to that. So you know, expectations and everything. But yeah, I don't know. There's other cool stuff in this. The only other thing I want to point out is like the kind of what do you call it? Is it I can't remember. Like, you know, which people was it that made like those giant like images in the sand or in the ground, whatever, that you could see from the sky, like that
in real
stuff.
life?
In real life,
Oh,
yeah. It wasn't
goodness.
Aztecs or no. I
don't
can't.
know.
I can't remember who it was, but the Incan. I think maybe Incan. I'm not sure. Like there was a people who, you know, made these giant things in the sand that you could see from the sky, like giant, basically images of gods, animals, that sort of stuff, right? And Illusion of Gaia has those in it as well. It's a cool kind of reference and nod to that real world thing. But yeah, that is in this game as well. Like there are huge patterns on the ground that you can see from the sky that are, you know, laying out, I don't know, something to do with beasts, gods, who knows. There's something interesting from a lore perspective going on there, so I'm interested in that. And yeah, lots more different types of floating islands. It seems like there's a lot of space in the sky to explore, it feels like. And so it feels like, you know, even if the base kind of area that you've gone around is very similar, there's still going to be so much new to explore, which is very exciting.
I don't think we've seen a shrine once in these 6 minutes. And
we see those kind of swirling green things that people have been thinking are like maybe shrine equivalents or something, like a warp point equivalent.
Shrines were such a core part of the gameplay loop of the first game that what replaces that loop in this game? Or like, you know, like... And that is frustrating in some senses to not know what even the gameplay loop of this game is going to be so close to release. And I do think the gameplay loop is at least something we'll probably get a better understanding of when I do think there will inevitably be a Treehouse Live. And we'll see.
I think it's inevitable they do a specific game-focused direct around Tears of the Kingdom. Like, they've got 3 months to put this game out. So
it's going to be a trailer that then leads into a play session.
I hope so. Yeah, okay. I hope so. Yeah. I think, like, you know, it would probably be I don't know, 30-minute direct that opens with a trailer, then breaks down a bunch of mechanics and stuff like that and talks through.
And they'll do it in April?
Maybe end of March.
End of March.
Yeah, end of March, I think, could be a good time for it, getting hyped about a month out. Yeah, I think it's possible. Yeah. But yeah. Anyway, Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Mixed feelings, but I think overall still, I'm still fucking excited for that game.
So, very excited.
Bally, what do you want to talk about next?
It was less of a surprise because it was more or less news broken in with rumors and things, but great to see Advance Wars Reboot Camp resurface.
Finally happening.
The great news is it is finally happening. The bad news is it's still 2 months away.
Yeah.
April 21st, I want to say.
Of all the Shadow Drop things happening in this direct, you would have expected this could be one of them, right?
Really surprised that to Shadow Drop Metroid, which I guess we can talk about in a minute, but like not Shadow Drop Advance Wars, especially knowing that something else could happen in the Ukraine-Russia war that might suddenly scare Nintendo back into hiding it away. So I don't know. Another point to make on its not reveal but kind of release date drop is they didn't want to show any gameplay. Like they didn't want to show any like tanks in action. I guess you saw like tanks in the cutscene that they showed, and those cutscenes look fantastic. Like I'm very impressed by what WayForward have done with that art style, and they've done their own take on the original art style, which I think is really nice. And that game is looking fantastic. But it was very strange to not see any gameplay. Like if you're someone who's just watching this direct, who doesn't know what Advance Wars is, that isn't going to, knowing now that the game's going to come out, you still won't know what Advance Wars is based on what they showed. And that is very strange when you're trying to market a game. So yeah, really just all very weird and hard to know. And I really hope that when the game eventually finally comes out, fingers crossed, it's not just a kind of damp squib and Nintendo never talk about Advance Wars again. But only time will tell, but hopefully it comes out and sells well. So a shout out to everyone here. You got to go buy that game when it comes out. And I'm sure it'll do very well. I'm sure it'll get I don't know, low to mid 80s Open Critic and that kind of thing. I think it's going to be a very solid game, and I'm very much looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you're like, well, did they get more time to add more stuff to it in the interim, or was it just like, did they would like, oh, we're just gonna leave it here, and you don't need to do anything else. But it could have been nice, you know. It would have been really nice to have this and say like, oh, also Way Forward made like a mini campaign of like additional levels of like a proof of concept of like doing a potentially new game. That would have been a really cool thing, but I don't.
Here's my call on the weird release date. I reckon they probably hit all their targets for this financial year, and they just want to sling it into the next financial year to help with next year's targets, even though that's the same year that Tears of the Kingdom is coming out. But who knows? I think they just want that extra boost for the next financial year and slung it into April.
Could be true. Also, on the other hand, I think that would be like a tiny drop in the bucket for Nintendo's financial year. But you know,
it's gonna sell well. What are you
maybe
talking
Advance
about?
Wars will break 1 million units. Like, I think it's possible.
If it sells like, I'd be ecstatic if it got like 2 to 3 million units, which I do think is possible.
Totally. Like, I mean, Xenoblade sells about 2 million units at this point in time. I think Fire Emblem also sells 2 to 3 million. So if it can enter that kind of league, then I think Nintendo will be like, oh, okay, let's do something with Advance Wars.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so we'll see how it goes. And I hope it turns out well for your sake and for everybody else out there. God. So let's talk about the game that I have to play this year, Bally, that you have told me I have to play. And, you know...
It's been rumored for years.
We expected this to happen. Jeff Grubb thought it was happening last year, but finally, Metroid Prime Remastered is come out. It's already come out. You know, you can play it, but I'm sure a lot of listeners are playing it right now at this very moment.
Fascinating when they do like stealth drop, but then they also be like, all right, and the physical copies coming in a few days, kind of thing. Like, very interesting.
Yeah, and I think it doesn't hurt it, right? Because it's a remaster, so it's not like it's a brand new game that they're splitting digital and physical release. And they wanted the big splash of it's out today, right? They totally wanted that. So, this looks like the best version there's ever been of Metroid Prime, and Metroid Prime has been in various versions before. We had the original on GameCube, there was the Wii version on the Trilogy collection that added motion controls to it, and now we have a fully ground up remastered version that I think a lot of people expected maybe to be just, you know, a bit prettier and that's it, but it feels like they've really gone the extra mile here. Like, the game looks significantly improved in a lot of different ways. It's added a bunch of features from a control standpoint that is great, and I don't think it's changed much about the content of the game. It feels like it's pretty much stuck the same stuff that's always been. I know that we had discussed like, well, what if they did the Wind Waker HD thing and took out or at least streamlined the Chozo artifact hunt at the end of the game. Feels like they've not gone in that direction with it and just kind of like kept it as is. But you know, it's still at this point the best way to play Metroid Prime now. You know, they added traditional twin stick controls. Fantastic. That's like a really important thing for a modern game that most people are coming to fresh these days. You know, I think motion controls are part of the package as well, so that they also have the original controls in there. If you're a sicko who only played the GameCube version and loved that control style, then you can do that also.
I do like the original control style, I'll admit that, and that's how I played it.
Yeah, totally. And you can just play it now. It's great. Like, I don't know, there's a huge amount to say except that this, for a lot of people, is one of the greatest games ever made. And now just a lot more people can get exposed to it and play it and understand why Metroid Prime is good before they do Prime 4, which interestingly, like, they didn't have anything to say on Prime 4 still. Even with this, they didn't feel a need to kind of caveat it in any way. I think with Dread, they did do that a little bit, but with this, they're like, no, it's coming out as Metroid Prime Remastered. And I think to some extent there's a little disappointment from folks of like, well, why is it just the first game and not the second and the third? And like, it seems like, according to Jeff as well, like those two will happen. They just won't get the same full-blown treatment as these. It'll be more of a kind of vanilla remastering. But yeah, I mean, I'm not, as everyone knows, I'm not a fan of Metroid Prime. I've tried it so many times in lots of different forms. You know, I was a scared little boy playing Prime 2 on GameCube, and then, you and I tried to. I started a new file on the trilogy with Metroid Prime. I remember you around in my house and we're playing it, and I was like trying to fight that fucking stupid fly boss or whatever, one of the first like mini bosses, and I was like, I hate these fucking controls. Like I couldn't deal with it. Like it was just really frustrating. So I'm hoping that this is the time that it clicks with me, and maybe it won't. Maybe I'll come out the other side and be like, you motherfuckers are crazy. Why does everyone like Metroid Prime? But yeah, we'll see.
I'm so convinced you might come out the other side thinking that, but I'm very pleased that, you know, people are playing this, people are loving this, people are understanding why like this game is so loved and is aged impeccably well in my opinion. Like I played this game about 10 years after it came out, and now we're 10 years on from that. So like I'd like to check in with this game if I have the time at some point this year to pick it up and play it again, because it's a really, really special game. It's maybe cleaner and nicer that they just did Prime 1 initially at least, and then they've been like, right, because people generally think that's the best one. And like
for sure. It's the iconic one.
Yeah, so iconic, and it's a really good, well-paced game, really good length, and like I think that some of the first-person shooting elements are some of the weakest aspects of the game, but that's not what like Metroid is traditionally about. It's also about the exploration, and that's where this game in particular, I think, is at its real strongest. It's a really interesting world to explore and really well-designed puzzles and morph ball puzzles, and there's a lot there that is. Because I think there's been so many first-person shooters since Metroid Prime that, yes, there are plenty of games out there that do first-person shooting so much better than Metroid Prime. Like that goes without saying, but it's all the other exploration, slower-paced stuff that I think is so impressive about Prime, and it's getting great reviews so far. I'm sure those great reviews will continue, but like it's so refreshing to me as a huge Metroid Prime fan that like a 2002 game in 2023 is holding up so well, even with a remastering and not just a ground up remake that other games might have required from that similar time period, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And I think someone said that like the original code base is still there, so like they clearly have just built on the bones of that original GameCube game, which shows how well it has held up over all this time. I think Iron Galaxy worked a bit on this as well. It looked like Retro did some internal work, but they had some external help as well, and that's cool to see.
Iron Galaxy, I think are they also in Austin? Am I making that
They
up?
might be. I'm not sure actually. I'm not sure. But yeah, shout out to Dave Lang and the crew for getting Metroid Prime out there for us. Good stuff. Bally, anything else that you want to jump onto as a major thing from this presentation?
Let's jump onto Game Boy and Game Boy Advance coming are now on Nintendo Switch Online. Like, I think it's a shame it's taken so bloody long. Here we are, like 6 years into the Switch life cycle. Like, here's some Game Boy games and some Game Boy Advance games, but you know what? They're presented really well, and it's a really great selection so far, and they've promised really great games to come. I've already played like 10 minutes of Kururin. That name.
Say that 10 times fast.
I mean, they obviously want to shorten it to KKK, but you can't shorten it to KKK.
I never thought about
like, you have to
Holy
just stick.
shit.
You just have to stick by Kururin.
Oh my God.
So yeah, that game is great fun so far. And there's obviously stuff like Minish Cap is already there. Like that's that's my number 2 2D Zelda. It's probably Minish Cap, honestly.
Yeah,
like, that's a really strong game, and I'm really excited for like Golden Sun coming in. Right, who knows when? But like I'd really love to play that. And then Game Boy wise, I just checked in with like Mario 6 Gold Coins, and that game really holds up still. Like it's still really good.
Such
really
a good game.
Really great music. And the Game Boy, it's really nice. They've got like the Game Boy Pocket version, the Game Boy Classic version where it's a lot more green screen. Yeah. And then you've got the Game Boy Color version for all these Game Boy games. It looks really cool. And it's got Pokemon trading card game on the way, which I'm very excited about. That's a really nice niche game that's in there. And hopefully they can actually bring Pokemon Red, Blue, Gold, Silver to the system, because that would be nice. Maybe they do have online on these things, so like trading is probably possible, right?
Yeah,
shouldn't it be?
Maybe.
And I know they did do work on the 3DS versions of those ports to include like the trading and the battling. So can't they do it? I don't know.
I think it might not work in that way, because the way that online functions is that one person joins another person's session, right? So for Mario Kart it works because on GBA it would be Mario Kart would be
because it's not
link
a home
cable.
console. It's
So it wouldn't be local, would it? So it would have to be multiple different. Interesting. So maybe you're right. Yeah, that could be the case.
That's why they do the Game Boy and Game Boy Advance do have a separate. The way they connect online is different because, as you say, it's not just share screen. It's slightly different. Obviously, we've not tried it yet, but I'm intrigued by that. Those options and if it can work. But very cool
I guess
so far.
Yeah, for sure. But I guess because in the past when we've done Wild Guns or whatever, it's basically you joining my session and we just click local
couch co-op, right?
Exactly, essentially. It's good. It's good that because they did mention you are playing Mario Kart, the GBA one with multiple people, so you would have to emulate a link cable essentially is what's going on there.
Yes.
So yeah, that's pretty damn cool. I'm excited for the future games to come. Like obviously Metroid Fusion is going to be on there, which I love. Fire Emblem is going to be on there, like my two favorite games ever, as well as Golden Sun that I want to get to. GBA is
no Advance Wars, funnily enough.
Yeah, that's funny that, huh? Yeah, I wonder why they would do that. But yeah, they are definitely putting a strong potential lineup out there. Also, I appreciate the dumbness of putting out Super Mario Brothers. Super Mario Advance 4, Super Mario Brothers 3 as the first Mario game on there. Just don't confuse anybody. Just choose the one with the worst title possible. That's fine. That was the game that I spent some time with. I have beef with Mario 3, but it's very easy to pick. I was having stuff on the background. I was like, I just want to play something on here that's easy to do that I don't have to pay that much attention to. And Mario 3 in GBA form is definitely nicer than original Mario 3 in NES form, I will say, from a visual perspective, but also a little bit from a playability perspective. It feels a little bit better, but it is fundamentally still Mario 3, and Mario 3 still. It's a fine game. It's an okay.
It's not just Mario 3. They've also included extra levels that were included on the e-card reader.
Exactly.
Which is very cool. So that's there.
Yeah, they actually had those available on the Wii U Virtual Console. I remember when people were talking about that stuff going away, they were like, pick up these advanced versions because they have all the content for the e-reader levels in them. So they're basically just bringing that over essentially from the Wii U Virtual Console. But yeah, it's really nice. I'm not sure how you access those. You might have to finish the game first and then get them potentially.
There's some add-on where you can buy the cards and then scan them into your Switch.
Yeah, so I just don't know how. Yeah, that would be fun, but I don't know. I don't know how they do that in this. I'm gonna have to dig around and see if I can find that stuff, because I would like to play those, because those are levels designed in the era. They're so interesting because they're the only 2D Mario level new things designed for 2D Mario within the GBA era, because the GBA era was just remakes of older Mario games. So the only original level design content of a GBA Mario game is contained within those e-reader levels. So I actually do want to play those as opposed to just playing through Mario 3 again, which, I've already played that game and had my beef with the sun and everything in that game. So it would be nice to check out the new stuff. But I have a weird summoning thing going on here, I guess, because I decided on a whim to play Kuro-Kuro-Kururin 2 days before the Direct happened on my Steam Deck, because I'd loaded it up on there and I was like, I should check this out because it's fun.
Summoned more games into existence.
Yep, and I Klonoa, I did it last time, and now I've summoned Kuro-Kuro-Kururin for some reason.
Send your summoning request to MBZ at ThisNintendoLife.
Absolutely, I'm there for it. Another summoning request that I had was for Baten Kaitos. So these are games that Monolith Soft made back in the GameCube days through Bandai Namco, and they weren't. I don't think Nintendo owned them at this point. I think they bought them after Baten Kaitos Origins, because the first game they did with Nintendo was Disaster Day of Crisis, I believe, which is a hell of a first project. But there you go. I did load these up on my Steam Deck as well, and I was preparing. I was like, look, no one's ever going to put Baten Kaitos out again. What the fuck? The name in and of itself is obscure. It just it's hard to say and know even what it means. So I'm like there's no way they're going to remaster these. What the hell? And then they do, and I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Like, really? It's pretty insane. So these are RPGs that Monolith worked on, obviously before Xenoblade, before Disaster, all that sort of stuff. And you know, I've always been, as a massive Xenoblade fan, I've always been interested in going back to their back catalogue of obviously Xenogears back when Takahashi was still at Square Enix, and they made Xenogears with Square, but then went on and he formed Monolith, and they made Xenosaga, all the Xenosaga games. So all of those I want to go back to. But Baten Kaitos is one of those GameCube games that I'm like, yeah, like I think there's some interesting stuff going on with it. I would like to learn a bit more about it. And I've heard it talked about a lot over the years. I know Guillaume on RFN talked about it relatively recently, and it's interesting because it was like, card-based combat systems have been in vogue recently with indie games quite a lot. Even in AAA stuff now with Marvel's Midnight Suns, there's like card-based stuff going on with that. And Baten Kaitos was doing it all the way back then on GameCube, which is super fascinating. So it is a card-based RPG, and you know, I think that I've been told the voice acting is terrible, and that's something to be aware of. But they're very niche, very interesting games that I have always had a bit of a fascination with. And you know, as a Monolith stan, I should probably be playing the Baten Kaitos games. So super cool. Like one of the out of nowhere, like I think it was actually leaked a little bit before the direct, so it wasn't a full surprise, but like the fact that it was real, I was like, okay then, sure, let's play Baten Kaitos. I will absolutely do that. And that seems like it's coming out in the summer, so you know, a little bit of time to wait on it, and which is fine because I've got way too many games to play all the time, but now especially. So yeah, it'd be nice to have a bit of a break from that. Bally, what other stuff do you want to talk about here?
I'm going to lump them together because they're kind of two JRPGs coming out this year that both got demos dropped. Octopath Traveler 2 and Sea of Stars.
Yeah.
I played the demo for Octopath Traveler 2. You played the demo for both of them. We're going to talk about those demos in the next segment, but really nice that Sea of Stars has a release date. I think they said
it's August, isn't it? It's like later in the year.
August 29th.
Oh, wow.
And then, Octopath Traveler 2, February 24th. And they've done the great thing again with Octopath Traveler where you play the demo and then that continues into the main game. So thank you very much, Square Enix.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I don't know if the Sea of Stars demo does the same.
No, I don't think it would. And we can get into the Sea of Stars one, but you know, having worked in the world of indie games for a while, like I know when stuff comes in hot, and Sea of Stars demo feels like it's come in hot a little bit in a few different aspects, and I totally understand why. I have been involved in trying to get demos up that are coming in hot, so I sympathize, I'll say. And also, like, it's the Steam Next Fest right now, so I've been playing a couple of demos from the Steam Next Fest, and this feels in line with the type of demo that would happen during a Steam Next Fest anyway. So yeah, it doesn't seem like it's going to be bringing anything over, especially because the demo starts in media res. Like, it doesn't start at the beginning of the game, right? It starts like in the middle of stuff.
On Twitter,
yeah, totally. So yeah, we'll get into it, but it is very cool that they have a demo out this early in advance of the game happening. I wonder if it would have been better marketing-wise to have it a bit closer to the launch of the game, but I guess they just want to keep building excitement for it until August.
If you're gonna get offered a Nintendo Direct beat, you're gonna take it, I guess.
But, absolutely, yeah, totally. And it does feel like they were like, oh, let's scramble to get a demo fully done for this Nintendo Direct so that we can take advantage of it, you know. And especially because it's a main Nintendo, it's not even an indie Direct. Like, this shows you what Nintendo think about this game and its positioning in their lineup.
Behind Sea of Stars for sure.
Right. So it's not just being relegated to a regular indie world. It's being given its kind of main spotlight in the mainline Direct here, which is good to see. But yeah, I mean, both of these are the types of RPGs I want to be seeing, you know. So it's very, very cool that both of them have demos and both of them got a bit of a spotlight kind of lumped together here. And yeah, we'll talk about them in the next segment because we have played a good amount of both of them. Cool. Bally, I've got to talk about probably the biggest surprise of the show, one of the biggest drops. Professor Layton is back, baby.
Layton is now big enough for a cinematic reveal.
I guess so. I mean, it's been nostalgically long enough, right? We can maybe tie this in with Ghost Trick, but it feels like it's been a DS renaissance in some sense with this, and maybe Fancy Life as well. And this kind of ties into the level 5 stuff also. But like, Professor Layton, is a series that was hugely popular on the DS, hugely so with a kind of casual audience as well, right? Like it was in the era of touch generations where Brain Training and Nintendogs and all those types of games were popping off, and somehow Professor Layton kind of wormed his way into that, and made a big name for itself as a series that was very puzzle focused. Like people who liked Sudoku, which was big at the time, were very into Professor Layton and the puzzles that it had. But the nice thing about Layton was it tied its puzzles in with a world and a story and characters and all that fun stuff, and it was a really cool combo of things. And obviously it had a whole trilogy on the DS. Then it had a fourth game that was also on the DS, which started a second trilogy, and that second trilogy was a prequel trilogy, so it actually takes place before the main trilogy. And then the 2 3DS games that followed that up, similar to Ace Attorney actually, because Ace Attorney had, well, Ace Attorney technically was GBA back in Japan, but then it came to the DS with 3 games, then had a fourth game that was also DS, and then 2 follow-up games that were 3DS games. So Layton and Ace Attorney sharing a lot in common generally, obviously had that crossover game, but yeah, there's a lot of Layton out there to play if you haven't played Layton before. But then the series just kind of disappeared, right? And I think this is a broader problem of Level 5 just kind of disappearing. And I think they put out a statement of some kind being like, look, we're finally seeing that video games can be global, and I was like, what the fuck are you talking about, Level 5? Like, what is wrong with you? Games be global the whole time. Like, your series have been popular in the West for a long time. But I think they had retreated back to just doing kind of Japan-focused stuff. I remember there was a Level 5 presentation a few years ago where they were talking about this thing called Snack World. This was basically when they were riding high, because the Yokai Watch was the biggest thing ever made in Japan, and Yokai Watch was making the money over money over money. And they made this thing called Snack World that had like this kind of like NFC kind of like in-world like real things that you would then buy, and you could scan them into the game and stuff like that. And it was a thing that was very Japan focused, and I think Snack World did come out here at some point, but it feels like it just completely flopped for them. And then post Snack World, it feels like they've just not really done anything, mainly because there's not been anything coming out in the West regarding them. And I think they might have just done some small stuff in Japan, but for some reason, this was the Nintendo Direct where they're like, all right, here we go. We're going to do this weird DecaPolice game, which during them showing that game off in the presentation, I was like, I typed on Discord, I'm like, this looks like the type of shit Level 5 would do during the 3DS era. And then like literally a minute later, the end screen is like Level 5. I'm like, I fucking called it. Like what? They're back again. And then obviously, Fantasy Life gets announced, but then Professor Layton, like, 3 Level 5 projects in this one Nintendo Direct, and out of nowhere, this company that was such a big force in Nintendo's handheld kind of third-party identity back in the day are just back, and it's slightly confusing, but also it's very cool. Like, I super appreciate seeing Level 5 back on top, because they make some great games, and they have some really, really cool stuff in their catalog. So, thrilled to see that there will be a new Professor Layton. Don't know what it's going to be, how it's going to look, any of that sort of stuff, maybe a new engine, that type of thing, and hopefully it's along the lines of the main trilogy games, because there was the spin-off game, which was Catriel, something like that, like Layton's daughter or something, and that was really bad. No one who was a Layton fan liked that game. I've heard people talk shit about that game constantly, so that felt like a flop, and not worth kind of having the Professor Layton name to it almost. But this is the new world of Steam, Bally. They're coming back in a big way. It feels like this is a big, proper, new Layton game, which is very exciting.
Are the other Layton games like pre-Steam? Like, are they like Victorian? I'm trying to work out.
Not. I guess the weird thing is like you're on a train for quite a few Layton games actually. So,
but is it a Steam powered train?
It might not be. What were
I don't know what train. There weren't trains before Steam.
Yeah, there weren't trains before Steam. So I'm like,
horse and cart.
Yeah,
is that a horse and cart train? Is that what we're getting at?
No, it was a real train. So.
Okay.
That's a good question. Does this mean this takes place before that second trilogy is going even further back in time?
Don't know.
Maybe? Okay, I don't know. Because I very distinctly remember the start of Layton 2, you're on a train for a pretty long part of the start of that game. So, yeah, weird. I don't know what that means.
Yeah. I never got to the Layton games, but I would love to get to them. And if it means jumping into this one as my first one, then so be it. I'll give it a go.
Yeah, for sure.
Because Layton never had because obviously Phoenix Wright had the trilogy brought to Switch, and that never happened with Layton. Maybe it's too hard to transpose, but
I don't think so. I think they can do it. Like I think it's definitely possible to do
we've
that.
Not had that in the last 6 years, but
right. I guess just because
we'll take a new game.
Right, because Level 5 haven't existed for the last 5 years, right? So maybe with this coming out, they could do what Nintendo are doing and like, hey, Metro Prime Remastered before Metro Prime 4, let's do all the Layton trilogy before this new one comes out. That would be a nice thing.
Oh, I mean, that means the new one is like 5 years away.
Of course, yeah. Well, I mean, they did a cinematic tease, Valley, so like,
I'd vote it'll come out end of next year. I could be wrong. I don't know.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, just to cover the other Level 5 games while we're here. DecaPolice, it's like a JRPG detective game. Looks Japanese in the way that you would expect. I think I'm interested to see it, but I'm not like there for it day one or anything. I think I'd be curious to hear what people think about it. To me, it feels like one of those games that in 5 years' time, when it goes on sale and the Switch eShop is about to close down, that's when I buy it. Like that, there are a few games on here like that where I'm like, yeah, I'll wait until the Switch eShop closes down and then spend 200 quid to pick up all these games. Basically, that's one. But the one I'm more interested in is Fantasy Life. It's actually Fantasy Life I. That's the subtitle because it's Japan. The Girl Who Steals Time. And I have the first Fantasy Life on 3DS. I bought it recently, secondhand copy, in my attempt, as I'm saying, to get all the 3DS games before the shop closes. And it's a game I've only heard great things about. Like, people love the original Fantasy Life. It has, like, it's basically like a kind of, a game where you do tasks like you're a chef or you're like a blacksmith or whatever, like you're in this town and you can kind of choose a profession and you do stuff related to that profession, but it also has like kind of minor dungeon crawling RPG elements to it. It just seems charming and adorable and a really nice chill kind of vibe. So I definitely want to play that game and I'm very interested to see where this new Fantasy Life goes, because it has, I think, a lot of potential to live up to, given how much people like that first game. So yeah, that one looks really, really cool. Very excited to see where that goes. Great. Bally, do you have anything else here that kind of stands out to you?
I thought that Next Wave of Mario Kart DLC looked very nice. That Yoshi's Island track is looking really cool. Like, it's almost like a blending of art styles, because they're trying to keep that original Yoshi's Island look, but then merge it with the traditional Mario Kart 8 style, and seems like it's a completely original track. I don't think it's one that was on the handheld, the mobile, I should say, not handheld. Good, I'm calling mobile handheld. What's wrong with me? What is wrong with me? So I thought that looked really cool. And I think that's coming in, I don't know, they didn't give us a specific date, did they, for it? But
I don't think
it's great. So I'm sure we'll check in with Mario Kart again when that comes. Cause
always,
it's still trucking along nicely.
There's Birdo as well. They put Birdo in the game.
And I think they suggested there's even more characters to come. So that's fun. I want Petey Piranha from Double Dash. That was my boy.
Definitely. He was cool. It would be nice if they paired these characters with items that go along with them. So like Birdo's eggs, something like that, that would be a fun thing to do. But
that's something they'll probably do for a new game, because it would so substantially change the whole balance of the game. But I'd be up for that. I love that about Double Dash.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and there's a lot of other stuff in here that's like DLC stuff, right? So there's Fire Emblem Engage DLC, which is a bunch of characters that they are now baiting me to buy because they put my boy Hector in the game. That motherfucker, there he is with his big axe, looking great. And they also announced a story DLC, Fell Xenologue, which I think is going to come with the Wave 4 of Fire Emblem Engage stuff.
DLC.
God, I hope so. Man, what a crossover that would be. We'll get to Shulk in a minute. But this is a trend. We can maybe talk about Splatoon DLC and Xenoblade alongside all this stuff, because they all kind of do the same thing. And this is a trend with Nintendo DLC generally. They just put out a bunch of fluff, and then they're like,
yes, it really is fluff.
Yeah, here's a bunch of shit, and then here's the thing you actually want to buy it for.
But we'll bundle it all together.
Right, really, you're paying the money for the thing at the very end of the day that has all the big stuff, but they're like, oh, here's some bunch of bullshit in case you want it, Which, in the case of Fire Emblem, I think those emblems are actually a bit more of a big deal, because they do change radically the game, and you can, pair them up with different characters, and there's lots of abilities they have, and all that sort of stuff, so there's a good amount of difference there. But it's it's not the same as a full story expansion, which has like new maps and new narrative stuff and all those sort of things. So there is a tease for that, which is great, and I will definitely play that. But it's likely in all of these cases, I will wait until the actual main story thing comes out. Then I'll just buy it all at once, and then I'll just have it all at once, So if I do want to do another playthrough of Engage, which I potentially will, then I will have all those new emblems, and I won't have to, worry about the drip feed of them coming out or whatever. And similar to Xenoblade, I am dying to go back to Xenoblade 3, frankly. Like, I've got a bunch of quests I still have to do, loads of stuff in that game I still want to do, but there are a bunch of new heroes, and I just want to wait until all the heroes are in the game alongside the new story to jump back in, and that's when I'll do it. So when the new DLC story comes out for Xenoblade, that's when I'll go back to the base game as well and really dig in and finish off all the stuff that I want to do in that game. So, yeah. And then we have Splatoon 3, which, Bally, what the fuck are they doing? Like, I know we say fluff.
I know we say fluff. What do in the plaza?
It's skins, basically. Instead of skins for characters, the skin is for the place that you don't do anything.
Oh my god, right. Oh god.
Like, you don't do anything in the hub. The hub is like a glorified menu, and I appreciate people like the hub and walking around it, but like, at this point in time, when you've played enough Splatoon, you're just going to the menus, man. I'm not walking around that hub anymore. I'm just, like, sometimes I want to see some Miiverse posts or whatever, but I'm not walking around that hub that much. And
I do prefer the hub with the first game than the current game. Splatoon 3's hub is ridiculously big and weird, and whereas I do like the simplicity of the first hub from Splatoon 1. But I don't want to pay money for DLC for it. I don't care about it that much.
No, of course not. So yeah, that was like the most... I'm like, as they keep going with this, I'm like, are you seriously, one of the things in this DLC is just changing the look of the plaza? Okay, what the fuck? And then they have this kind of weird, vibesy, creepy, ethereal kind of section that is promoting the actual thing that you're paying for, Side Order, the DLC story expansion for Splatoon 3, that looks like near as hell, like so fucking near Automata, it's insane. And I am very down for whatever that is, coming off the single player of Splatoon 3 and loving it. This looks really cool from a visual aesthetic perspective.
But that's all we know about it is visually it's got this unique aesthetic, and that's it. And that we don't know, like, is it going to be single player levels? We assume so, but like, who knows?
No idea. But I'm in for it. I think after that main game story, I definitely want to see what they do.
The main game single player was very strong. Really
excellent
good stuff. Yeah,
excellent stuff. So yeah, definitely want to check that out. But I will wait until that happens, and then I guess I'll get a weird plaza along with it for purchasing it. So that'll be fun. So I'm just going to do quick Xenoblade spoilers here. So if you don't want spoilers, then skip ahead. I'll put a timestamp. So they showed like the smallest snippet of the DLC for Xenoblade 3, and it has a lot of questions raised. Basically, there's a lot of shit in that game that is like, obviously it's the two worlds colliding, and so, Shulk and Rex both exist outside of the cycle, but then they exist within the cycle when everything gets kind of smushed together, and Alvis is there for some fucking reason. Alvis, everyone knows, of course, the computer who actually was the kind of part of the phase experiment that happened at the end of Xenoblade 1 that caused the entire splitting of the worlds, but he is essentially a machine, also part of the Aegis and part of all the kind of the Trinity processor and all that sort of shit, the part of the conduit, all that sort of shit everyone knows about. And Alvis has gone evil, so either someone has rewritten his programming and he's not actually Alvis and he's just being taken control of. There's also the factor of Xenoblade 3, Console A is never present, and he's called Alvis, of course, like Console A is going to be a factor in there. And we've got older Shulk, who still voiced by Adam Howden, good to see. Older Rex, not voiced by the same person who voiced Rex, which I think is a good thing, because I think Rex's voice actor was not to my taste, let's say. I did not like him. So I appreciate that they've gone in a more rugged... He's still northern, but it's a much more rugged kind of voice, which fits his aesthetic for how much older he looks now. Because, look, Rex was basically like a 10-year-old, essentially. I think he was supposed to be a bit older than that, but he looked very, very young. So I appreciate that, like, Chad Rex is here with his cool hair, and he's wielding the two Aegis blades and stuff like that. So we've got Shulk and Rex facing off against Alvis, and then we see... another character who looks Noah adjacent, but that's kind of, there's a bunch of stuff that happens as to why that's the case, but he also looks like the protagonist from Xenogears, Feng, so like I don't know how that kind of factors into things. I think it's a reference, but basically this seems like it's going to be the founders' story, right? Like it's going to be the story of the founders of the city, and what happened with all that stuff previous to the main story of Xenoblade 3. So we're not going to get the main crew back together. It's going to be all focused around kind of what happened with the experiment to fuse the worlds together, and what happened in the aftermath of that potentially, and with N and everything, and destroying the city and all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of potential narratively with this and answering a bunch of questions, but I think it also sets up a lot of questions. I watched a 72-minute video from a YouTuber called Luxin, who's a big Xenoblade guy who does lots of lore deep dives and narrative stuff. And this video in total was 75 seconds long, and he did a video that's like 72 minutes analyzing a 75-second video, which he goes into a lot kind of more depth than I could on this stuff, but it's very exciting. And also you get a quick snippet of Bionis leg, like you can see the bridge where Juju's the thing gets broken down, and you can see that opening, one of the opening areas of Xenoblade 1, but it is clearly part of Ionios, so like it feels like that area existed prior to Xenoblade 3. This kind of like building into why it would be a founder story, in the sense that the Annihilation events would have destroyed that landmass potentially, or maybe that even happens in this game. So there's a lot of stuff going on. I realize, Bally, you've not understood a word I've said for the last 5 minutes.
What? Okay, right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
But
I'm still here.
Yeah, no, but that's I'm very excited for more Xenoblade 3 stuff. There's a lot of potential angles and paths they can go down with that, and whether it leads to something new. Anyway, spoilers over. Everyone can come back now. We're all good. Bal, is there anything else? There's lots of stuff still on this list, but
slim pickings for me personally.
Yeah. I'm excited for the Dead Cells DLC, frankly. I think that looks sick as hell. It does look
cool. There's a hell of a lot of music in there.
Yeah, and it's great. It's great to see how much love and care they're putting into it, like the Dracula boss, all that sort of stuff, the enemies, the weapons, the cross, the axes, obviously the vampire killer, the whip itself. Like, it's great to see so much love being given to that thing, which is amazing. And yeah, I definitely want to check that out. I've bought Dead Cells DLC in the past, but this seems like a much more significant thing, and it's coming out, I think, March as well, so it's pretty soon around the corner. And yeah, the last couple of things for me are the detective stuff. So Ghost Trick is coming back. If you've never played Ghost Trick, it's a really good game. I'm not a Ghost Trick fanboy. I'm not like thinking it's the second coming of Christ, which most people do. It's written by Shu Takumi, Ace Attorney guy, all that sort of stuff. The game is really, really good, and I think this HD glow up is awesome. It looks really, really, really nice. So yeah, definitely check out Ghost Trick if you've never played it before. And then Master Detective Archives Raincode, which is the next game from the Danganronpa team, which my fingers are crossed that it's good, because nothing that team has put out since Danganronpa V3 has been great, or at least the combo game that they did with with Kodaka and Ushikoshi made a game called World's End Club that was very bad. People didn't like, so I'm hoping that Master Detective Archives Raincode is good. Fingers crossed. But yeah, lots of detective stuff going on in this presentation. And it's also cool to see Etrian games coming to the Switch finally, because Etrian is a series that has been huge on DS, 3DS for the last few years, and is finally arriving on Switch with some classic games 1 through 3, which I don't think are super beloved. I think 3 onwards is probably where that series is good and where people like it. I have Etrian 5 on 3DS to get to at some point, so but it's really nice to see that they still care about that series in some way, and trying to figure out a way to do it on a non-touchscreen, non-dual screen system. I'm sure it's going to be tricky, but they got to figure it out somehow, because that's not Nintendo are not doing one of those systems again, at least for the near future. So anyway, that's it. That's the Nintendo Direct. There's other stuff in there. They're bringing back Style Savvy through a new thing called Fashion Dreamer, and Marvelous are involved now, but I don't know. We'll see what that's like. Final thoughts, Bally? How are you feeling coming out of this?
Very strong. I think people were quite confident we'd probably see or hear about the big game that's probably going to come out in October, November that we don't know about. I'm certainly leaning towards that being 2D or 3D Mario, so I think maybe that was something that could have been there that wasn't there, but that would have made it absolutely the top, if not the best direct of all time. But the fact that I wasn't there, it's still an incredibly strong direct. More information on a lot of games you already know about. Not a ton of new drops, but the few new drops that there were pretty good.
Yeah. I really enjoyed this one, and I think there's a lot of stuff to dig into now, right? Just having the Game Boy and GBA on Switch. I can get Metroid Prime Remastered now for a reasonable price as well. It's $34.99 in the UK at least, so they're not charging us full price for it, which is appreciated at the very least, because Nintendo I would have expected them to do that, like it's the sort of move that they make. It's like, no, it's 50 quid. It's like, oh god damn it. But thankfully they actually made the right choice, and loads of fun surprises. Layton coming back is just awesome, so I'm super stoked for that to be the case. So anyway, that is going to be us for this first segment, talking about the Nintendo Direct. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back after this break to talk about the games we have been playing. See you in a bit. Alright everyone, welcome back to the second part of today's show. It's time to talk about the games we've been playing. There's been a few. There's been a lot of Japanese inspired / Japanese RPGs happening as per the Nintendo Direct. And Bally, we've been playing some demos from that thing. The main one, of course, being Octopath A Traveler 2. The follow-up to your favourite RPG, Octopath Traveler. Yes. I know that you've had a chance to play a little bit of this. How are you feeling so far about Octopath Traveler 2?
Yeah, I mean, I've only played one chapter with Throne the Thief. I really like it. I don't think it's changing up too much from what I can see so far, but I really love it, and it just reminds me that the music, the battle system, I think the art style is arguably a little bit of a step up. It's looking even better than before. It's all just really good. I really loved it. And I thought Throne's story was definitely probably in the top half of stories that I've seen in Octopath Traveler. Like, I think her story's pretty good. Pretty good so far.
Yeah. Has it had any kind of like intrigue? I've heard like people talk about it in relation to Primrose's story in some way.
It's quite similar. I did think that. So she's part of a syndicate that she's been born into, and then the leaders of the syndicate are called Mother and Father. They're not actual mother and father. That's just their name.
It's like a mafioso family of some kind.
Right, and then the mother and father, they basically manipulate the members of the group to essentially like backstab each other to work their way up the ranks. And yeah, it's really cool actually. And they all have like a collar, and like they can't escape because of their collar supposedly or something. So yeah, it's all it takes place in like this city that just feels a lot more vibrant than the first game. And it's not through the character interactions necessarily, it's just to do with like the density of the city just feels more dense through the pixel art almost. Like it's got that real thing to it. And I should say like every character has their own special abilities both outside the battle and inside the battle. So outside the battle she can sneak up behind people and knock them out, and I think you can like gain outfits off people, steal stuff from them.
Right.
And then in battle, her special ability is she gets like another turn, so you can have 2 back-to-back turns, which is quite a good use of manipulating some of her abilities to kind of do extra damage or heal extra or this kind of thing. So yeah, I'm really impressed. It only took like an hour and 15 minutes maybe, and I know I could have played more, but I'm keen to just wait until we're closer to February 24th before playing the rest of the demo and then go into the game. So, but I did want to play just one chapter just so I could talk about it on the show, and I am very impressed. I'm reminded why this is my favorite JRPG of all time.
Yeah, and I think that there are still concerns to be had, because I also was very positive on this demo as well, but I also was very positive at the start of Octopath Traveler when I first played that game, right? And the issues only kind of showed themselves later on when stuff like the gap between levels of characters and kind of grinding stuff appeared, and you know the kind of lack of story cohesion between the different characters and that sort of stuff was a little worrying. And you know I can already see a little bit of that stuff, and I don't know how they will kind of get over it or make it work. But I started with Oswald the Scholar, and you basically, when I first started, I was going through and seeing each of them, and he's the only one when you click on him, it says if you choose this character, you will do 2 of these chapters back to back, so you have to do them. And there's a narrative reason why that is. His story is basically, so he's a magician, he's a scholar, he does all the magic stuff, and I chose Cyrus as my initial starting character in the first game, so I thought I'll just do the same here, right? And I'll choose the magic user because I really liked Cyrus and he had a lot of potential combat wise, so I thought similar here. And this story starts out and you're in a court, and he is basically being sentenced to life in prison for the murder of his wife and daughter, and you're like, oh shit, like it's some rough stuff, right? Like there's a fire that basically has killed them, and he's being sent away, and you know you obviously kind of figure out the course of doing this that he has been wrongfully imprisoned, and he has been framed essentially for this crime. And so you spend that first chapter in prison, and it's basically a prison break story where you are going around the yard talking to people, kind of figuring out, like, you have to find an accomplice to help you. But the really interesting part is he can't use his magic because he's been muzzled, so they basically have a muzzle over his mouth because spells come from him speaking them, and so he's like, he can't really talk to people. So he has to figure out a way of getting out of this prison by just like communicating, by writing to people or like signing to people, that sort of stuff. So it's a super interesting kind of like, as you go through these steps of trying to find someone to help you, you need to find an escape route, and you need to find the guard patrols or something like that to figure out what to do. And between those sections, he goes back to the prison and goes to sleep, and you get flashbacks of like this guy he worked with, Harvey. So Harvey, who was this other scholar who worked with him, and the basic story of them trying to like push the bounds of magic and figure out, like, you know, the secrets of all that sort of stuff. And you kind of slowly unveil the story of like what happened in the backstory there, and it kind of leads up to the fire and everything. So really strong narratively to kick off. And then the second chapter is you kind of like having escaped the prison, then kind of getting out of there, getting to the mainland and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's a bit more extended, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it had, again, really solid writing, and I think the writing in Octopath for me is actually a bit of a step above Triangle Strategy. Like, Triangle Strategy is dense with its writing, but I think it's not very economical, and I think Octopath is it's still a little bit tropey and JRPG-y, but it's a little bit better at kind of getting things across more succinctly, which I appreciate. I think it does a good job of that. And so yeah, I got to the mainland with him, and then, you know, I was like level 8 or 9, and then I went all the way over to the next town where the cleric was, Temenos the cleric. And then his story starts off with this like crazy epic battle. It's like this huge, like this ancient archsage versus this god, and you go up to the top of a tower and you have like 4,000 HP and you're like fighting. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? This is epic as hell. And then like it turns out that that's all a performance being put on by Temenos at like a church, cool. And it like it zooms back and he's like doing a puppet show essentially of like the lore and the history of the world with the gods. It does just feel a bit
deeper than the first game. Like, these stories, I did think a strength of the first game was the intricate stories. Now, out of the 8, some of them were much stronger than others, but it was nice that you got this local small town feel to a lot of these stories.
Right. But some of them felt a bit like Tressa's, for example, was like, okay, like it's just a little bit nothing.
Yeah, it was very weak. Yeah, I agree. and that is a shame. But I mean, we've talked about 3 different characters so far, and they all sound already a little stronger. Now maybe we've just got lucky, and the other 5 characters are maybe on the weaker side. But I'm hoping that there's just feels like there's a little bit more care put into like the design of like these areas and narratives, and I still am stand by, like, I think that there will be awkward clunkiness later on, and there's going to be some grinding, and I'm sure this game copies the first game where the big bad god that ends the world that they all link to in a very subtle small way is probably still the level 70 post credits thing, but I don't know, who knows. I mean I just beat all the so I did the 8 times 4 is 32 chapters.
Yes.
I did do all 32 chapters last time, and I predict that's probably what I'll do with this game and end it there, unless I'm having an absolute whale of a time and keep going. But I don't know.
Yeah, it depends how they kind of make that stuff work.
Yeah, I'd love it if they brought that stuff together and made it more simple.
Yeah. And
you could avoid grinding, because you finished the game on arguably level like between 30 and 40, but then the post-game stuff, you had to be level 70, 80 just to stand a chance.
So stupid,
man. Really stupid, because if it was like level 40, I might just roll into it and try it, but like it was just so much that I just looked up online and I was like, right, okay, that's good to know, but not for me. And I don't know if this game will do something similar, but we'll see.
Yeah, the thing that you mentioned that worried me as well was like, well, they've told us we have nighttime where enemies are stronger, so that means if you want to grind, go at nighttime. And
they're proud of the fact that there's going to be a bit of grinding. So
yeah. It kind of feels like that.
For the start, it doesn't matter because you only have up to 4 characters. They all level together. It's once your party always remains 4 characters, but then you end up having 8 characters, and the character of their own story has to be there, so you have to rotate. So it's not just a case where you can. I lent on the fact last time that I basically had a healer that stayed with me, a heavy hitter that stayed with me. I mixed up that 3rd character, and then the 4th character was always the character that had to be included for that story kind of thing. And you can kind of get by, but it's not a very elegant way of structuring it.
No, and that's the thing of the balance of levels, right? Like, I came out of one story, well, technically having done 2 chapters, because that's the way that it works, so it kind of imbalances things, but like Oswald was level 9, and Temenos was level 5, so already I'm like, well, this sucks, you know? Like, I just don't like that they need to have a way, and this could be the case in the final game, where you are leveling equally with people and you can do that, and people who are not on your team do get experience even though they're not on your team, that type of thing. But I'm not holding my breath for it, because they seem to be stuck to tradition in quite a few ways here. And like similar to the first game, like I got to the second town with Oswald, and Temenos pops up and is like, "Hey, hello, I'm going to join you." And Oswald says nothing; he's just silent.
Yeah, so that's very memorable from the first game. You know, when that happens, and that's how they kind of link the 8 people together.
Totally. Yeah. And then what happens is you basically are like, "Do you want to start this guy's story? So we'll take you away and do that for a while, then we'll come back afterwards." And that's what I did. So I played through 3 chapters in total in the 3 hours, and I basically pushed it right up to the limit. I was just finishing Temenos' chapter just as the 3 hours hit, which I kind of squeezed it in nicely. So that was nice. That was good. But then they bring up a splash screen and like, "You've been done for 3 hours. Now you can wait for the full game."
Bugger off until 24th of February.
Exactly. Give us some time to put this game out properly. But yeah, I think exactly from what I've heard from you, and like the opening, it feels like they grab you straight away. Like the opening section of each of these stories sounds like they just grab you straight away, which I think is really important because, as I said, stuff like Tressa in the first game, it's like, well, I'm a merchant, I'm going to go and see the world. And there wasn't really like an inciting incident that really grabs you in that way. So I hope that that's the case for all these stories. And it also feels like the first 2 chapters for Oswald, it feels like he should have 6 chapters, because the first chapter is escaping and the second chapter is like a little bit more escaping, but he's not really started his journey yet. And like, you're starting your journey, so is your journey only going to be 2 more chapters? Because that feels like brief.
I mean, I just assumed there was going to be 32 chapters of this game, but I could be wrong. It would be awesome if they mixed it up and some had more, some had fewer, some were longer, some were shorter.
Right. As long as the story needed to be, as opposed to like we have to have 4 per character because that's how it goes.
Yeah, and that is a real weakness I do think with the first game, where the opening chapters are strong, but then you have 8 final bosses. There's like 8 chapters wrapping up all these things, and right. Yeah, it felt great on the good characters. On the weaker narrative characters, it felt a little more chore-ish, and I just really hope the stories can stay strong, because that would make it just that much better to get through.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's already broken with tradition in the sense that Oswald's second chapter doesn't have a boss at the end. It's just like, it's a bit shorter. You just escape from the island, you're on this village, and then you just leave, and that's the end of the second chapter.
Okay, that's giving me hope, because my chapter felt very traditional. As strong as it was, it felt very traditional. But yeah.
That's the right. Like Primrose, for example, I think has such a strong start, and then the rest of her story is so paint by numbers. It's like, go take out this guy, then go take out this guy, then go take out the final guy, right? And it's very...
I do worry about that for Throne, but hopefully there's a little more twist to it.
Yeah, and it depends how much interactivity the party has, like how they handle that, and if that makes any headway in terms of the narrative intertwining. We'll see. It would be nice.
Because the artwork for the game has the 8 characters sitting around a fire.
Yeah.
You assume they're talking to each other, but in reality, I guess they're just sitting in silence. Because you just want that level of interaction where I feel like a game like Final Fantasy VI does a really good job where each character has their own individual story, but then there's an awful lot of narrative where they're part of a party,
Yes.
And it manages to do both really well. And I'd love Octopath to lean more into that, but people have heard us moan about this with the first game before.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But yeah, the music, the battle system,
all that
where
stuff
this game
is
shines.
just,
it's
fantastic.
It's
really
is.
Cool.
Cool.
Like getting into the boss fight and hearing the music for the first time, it's like, all right, here we go. Yeah, like it's really kicking into gear. And yeah, some of that very minor combat changes, but like you said, you have like, if you press X in battle, you have like an additional ability for the character. So
I think it builds up the more you break an enemy and the more you are hit by an enemy. I believe it's those two things.
Yeah, totally. So for Oswald, his is basically his spells at a base level just hit everybody, so it's nice to break multiple enemies at once, but you can change it so that you focus the target on one enemy. So it's basically one of those things where for a boss you want to build them up to the point where you break them, then you want to use all of your boost points to like max out at 4 boost points, and then use the focus X attack to do the spell, and that's where you're going to get maximum damage essentially. So it's like a really concentrated blast of magic basically. So yeah, very, very cool stuff. I definitely want to play it. Will I have time? We'll see. But I definitely want to. I mean, it's captured me already. So I'm interested in what reviews say mostly. But yeah, we'll get to it, I think. The other demo that dropped was Sea of Stars, which is a very anticipated independent RPG that is coming out end of this year, as we talked about in the first segment. It is really cool in a lot of ways. I also think, there's some elements that I'm not concerned about, that I'm like, I don't know, we'll see how this all comes together, because it does feel like the demo was a little bit, lacking in some parts where... So that you've seen in the trailers, there's the big kind of stone guy who grabs the circle and throws you, and that's kind of your teleportation in the game, right?
Okay, yeah.
So you start off by, you arrive there. So you arrive from another teleportation stone to that big stone guy, and it's your 3 party members, and they're just talking about something that you don't really know, and it's like, okay, we're just kind of in the middle of the story here. And off you go off to the race, and you start running around. The movement is really nice, like just animation and the world and the pixel art is just gorgeous, so it's really stunning to begin with. And again, Yoshinori Mitsuda on the music, so the music has been pretty outstanding so far also. And you can do a couple of things like movement-wise, where you can jump down ledges and you can climb up ledges, so you can basically press the A button and you could kind of go down ledges, and there are some that are too high, and so you have to move blocks in order to get up to them. There's a little bit of Golden Sun in here, where there's like overworld abilities, almost Zelda puzzles, where I chose Valere. She's the girl with the blue hair. I chose her as my main character. You get to choose between the boy and the girl at the beginning. They're both in your party, but one of them is the de facto character you control, or your leader or whatever. So I chose her, and she has an ability that's like a little bit of a wind blast, so you can push blocks and the blocks will move, and then you can move the block into a place where you can then climb on top of it, and then use that to climb on top of another area. So there's a little bit of verticality in the puzzle solving, which is nice early on. very easy kind of like walking around the overworld and, switching switches to open bridges, that sort of stuff, kind of basically. And I jumped into a battle, and the battle just happens and doesn't really tell me anything. I'm like, what is going on here? Like it shows these enemies, and these enemies have like 3 different icons above their head. It looks like a gambling machine kind of thing, like 3 squares on a gambling machine, and they're 3 different icons. And I'm like, what does any of this mean? And then they have a timer over their head as well with a number next to it. And I'm like, I just jump straight into a battle, and I have no idea what I'm doing. So the game doesn't really have tutorialization in this demo, which is a bit annoying.
You've got a lot of JRPG chops to try and work out what you're doing,
Yes.
Imagine someone without that knowledge.
Exactly. The way that they mitigate it is that they have a menu option that just says how to play, and so you just have to go into that menu and you have to read through like 12 different screens of like, how does the combat work, basically. So basically after that first battle I was like, how does this, I don't understand any of this, so I'm just going to go to the menu and look at that how to play thing, and it does give you a breakdown. But it would have been, again, this is clearly coming in hot, so they haven't built a full tutorial for you or anything, but you do have the information there. It's just like put in a separate menu that you have to read through. So essentially the idea is that when you're in a fight, you can choose any of your party members to attack at any time, but they have cooldowns, right? So you can attack with one of them, then they'll be on cooldown until the other 2 members of your party have done their thing. So all 3 have to have acted, and then it resets everybody. But you can choose who attacks first and who attacks next and that sort of thing. So in any order of the three characters, you have different moves. You have regular skill. So like Valir, for example, has a moon attack, which is like, it's got Mario RPG style or Mario and Luigi Paper Mario style button presses. So she throws out this moon thing and it spins and hits an enemy, then boomerangs back to you, and you have to tap A at the right time to deflect it, and then it keeps it's basically like tennis in Zelda, where you're fighting Ganon. So you're basically having to deflect this attack constantly back and forth, and it gets faster and faster and faster, and the faster it gets, the harder it is, and so you can only go for like 6 or 7 before it comes too fast for you to do properly, right? So that's one of her attacks. There's another big like sun blast attack that the main dude does, where you build up the sun and it gets to a peak point where it's super big, and then it starts shrinking again, so you have to get the timing right to when it's the biggest possible sun, and then it will hit the most for the most damage. So there's a lot of like personal input that you have on timing, both of you doing regular attacks, so when you do a regular attack on an enemy, tapping to do more damage, but also tapping to defend when an enemy attacks you. So it is really just the Mario RPG school of design with the combat, where it's a bit more interactive. You're actually applying kind of timing based stuff in order to do more and less damage. You also have these gambling bars above enemies. They represent different types of damage that you can do. So a sword will be your main guy's sword. A hammer will be the damage that your spear does, as well as your other third party member who has this big shield. Their regular physical damage is represented by this hammer. So you can use either of those characters to break that, versus the sword that you have to use to break that icon. And if you break an enemy's stance, essentially, you're able to get in hits before they're able to kind of attack in a way. So it's about managing, like, okay, so this enemy has a time ticking down of 3. That means after 3, it's not after 3 turns, it's after 3 different actions. So if one of my characters attacks, that will tick down to 2. And if another character attacks, that will tick down to 1. So it's about managing, there's this one enemy that is this big bomb that will explode after a certain amount of time. So you want to break its stance before it does that, and it will destroy itself before it has a chance to do big damage and explode on one of your party members, essentially. So it takes a little bit of time to get your head around of like, how does this work and what am I doing and all that sort of stuff. But by the end of the demo, the like kind of last boss of the demo, I felt really good and I felt like I was in a groove. Your characters don't have a lot of MP. You basically get MP back every regular attack you do. So you can use so the big sun attack takes 8 MP, but your character only has like 11 MP total. So it's basically their whole bar. So if you're going to do it, you want to build up to it and do it, but then you have to use regular attacks, and every time you hit an enemy, you get 3 MP back. So you would have to do like multiple attacks to get that MP back to you so that you can do the big attacks themselves. And enemies have vulnerabilities, so some of them are weak to certain types of damage. I haven't really figured out how that is or why that is. But then you also have this combo meter, and the combo meter governs combo attacks, and combo attacks are kind of like Chrono Trigger, where two characters together will do a certain type of attack, and that certain type of attack also has different elements associated with it. So, if you have one turn left on an enemy, and they have a hammer and a sword showing, you're not going to be able to do that in one turn with one character, because only the dude can use the sword, and only the girl and the other guy can use the hammer. So if you use a combo attack, it does sword damage and hammer damage at the same time, so that's when you want to use those in order to kind of get yourself through that situation. So lots of elements to it, but engaging in a fun way, and has a lot of promise, I think, and potential. And that last boss fight that I did really was kind of pushing you to really understand all the elements of it, which I appreciated and thought it did a good job of that. But the story so far, I haven't really been following that well. Maybe it's something to do with the text or the writing, but I found it a bit hard to read and a bit hard to parse what was really going on. It was okay. Like, I remember The Messenger being a game where I did read it all, but I didn't really pay much attention because it was a Metroidvania / platformer. I didn't think the story was that interesting or warranted me paying attention to it. So my biggest worry here is that they don't have the writing chops to kind of hold up an RPG in that way. But everything else is really on point. So it's a question of like, do you care enough about the story in order to kind of get through the fun stuff like the combat and the areas and the overworld and all that sort of stuff. There's definitely like minor nitpicks, but like the first town you get to is like bustling, loads of characters around, really beautiful, great music. Like, it's this kind of beach seaside area. You talk to these pirates, you kind of go along with them, and then you have to basically go through this dungeon, and the dungeon has like mini puzzles in it. It also has it has a bit more traditional save points, like you have to save at a save point, which is a bit annoying, and you rest at a campsite, so like you have to go and rest, and you have to cook food and items, and it's it doesn't do the chained echoes thing where it heals you. Like, you're gonna hear me complaining about a lot of RPGs now because chained.
It's gonna be your favorite phrase forevermore.
Yeah,
it doesn't do the chained echoes thing.
Look, chained echoes has just frankly changed the fucking game. All right, like chained echoes is like, get rid of all this bullshit, and every other RPG is like, well, we still like the bullshit. I'm like, no, shut up. Chained echoes, look at that guy, he's doing great, look at him, he's running faster than you. All right,
so wedded to the bullshit.
Yeah, they really are. So it's fine, I get it, I get why they do it, but I would appreciate if they didn't, but what you're gonna do, is an RPG. So yeah, I like it quite a bit. It's really, really pretty, and I think once the full game comes out, a lot of this stuff will be ironed out. There's weird stuff, like, for some reason, when characters started talking initially, there was no, like, like in Animal Crossing where you get a bit along with text, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I think that's a polish thing that subconsciously you don't really think about, but when it's not there, you're like, oh, it feels like something's missing here when a character is talking, and the thing that's missing is the little bit that comes along when the text scrolls, right? Yeah. Like, little polish things like that aren't quite in there. I think it is in there, but it only showed up later in the demo. It, like, wasn't working in the beginning, then was working later, so yeah. Just little things like that.
Do you think you'll pick it up day one, or are you going to wait for some reviews? Or
yeah, I think I'll wait a little bit. There's promise here, and I think there's a lot of potential, but I don't know how it's all going to pan out in the end. We'll see. I like the prospect of the kind of Zelda overworld puzzles, and the combat system has a lot of fun stuff in it. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. But I think that it's worth playing that demo. I think it only took me about an hour, so if you want to check it out, I'd recommend doing it. So yeah, nice. Go ahead and see your stars.
I'll get to that.
That's pretty great. Bally, I also finished Fire Emblem Engage. It took a lot of my time over the past couple of weeks. I think I was chapter 16 or 15 last time that we spoke about it, and my saga of reloading my save file. And
you could have breezed through this game a lot faster if you weren't enjoying it on an easier mode. So the fact you went back and did this. Was it 82 hours, did you say?
85? Yeah, 85.
I think that does show that this is definitely in your top few Fire Emblems, right?
Yeah, man. It's really good. It's really good. It's challenging and fun, and I mean, in some ways bullshit. Like, there is like a late game level. Okay, here's what happened. There's a late game level, chapter 25, that I spent 2.5 hours on, and then I realized I was fucked, basically. And I was like, well, I have to restart this whole thing. And I was like, well, let's do it. Let's restart the whole thing. And I didn't see a way of me getting around it, doing it the regular way. So I then proceeded to spend 2 more hours trying to come up with a warp strategy in order to kill the boss on the second turn of the game, instead of like spending, you know, ages doing that. It still took me 2 hours to get that warp strategy working, because it was a combo of... So Micaiah's Emblem allows you to transport multiple people with the use of a staff. So I was using a warp staff to warp myself plus 5 of my allies halfway across the map. Then I used a rescue staff to rescue the rest of them towards me. Then I had stuff like I put Sigurd on Yunaka, so because she has the pass ability as a thief. So the boss is surrounded by a bunch of enemies, and enemies block your path in Fire Emblem. So the only way to get around them was to warp towards the boss, or to use someone like Yunaka, who can go through enemies with the thief skill of pass, which allows you to just walk past enemies. But I also had to put Sigurd on her, because Sigurd, as an emblem, has huge movement addition. So even though she's only halfway across the map, I turn on Sigurd, I go all the way to the boss, all the way through the enemies, and I can do a couple of hits with her, move her to the side, then I take the rest of my party. I'm using dancing stuff as well, so I use Goddess Dance with Byleth Emblem, as well as the Dancer Seedal, in order to get multiple dances going, so that I get more people warped over to near the boss. So I have like 3 people near the boss, and I'm relying on a percentage chance, against my favor, a 40% chance for the enemy to hit me, because if the enemy hits me, then I do this additional damage that will take their health bar down to 0, and like multiple times across this, it just wasn't giving me the RNG I needed. And like I got right to the end, and I was like, I was like so like exhausted doing this, and this was after like a pretty long, stressful like work day, and I was like in this space of 5 hours on this map and just like fully into it, and then I finally got this breakthrough, and like it was one of the most like elative moments of like, oh, I'm fucking finally done with that shit. Like it was like such a trial, and at the end of it I was like, do I like this game? And then I came back the next day and did the same thing again. So I think it says yes, I do. Basically, I hate punishing myself, or I guess I love punishing myself in that sense with Fire Emblem. So yeah, it was a good kind of end, and the final boss is a really big. It took me like 3 hours, that chapter. A lot of planning, a lot of just like getting around things, and it's so fucking good. It's really, really great stuff.
You gonna play Fire Emblems on hard in the future?
I don't know. I think this one was a case where normal was just so... There's such a gulf. Like, the gulf between normal and hard in this game is almost unbelievable, like how much more difficult it is on hard compared to normal. And I kind of wish there was a bit of an in-between, you know? Like, if that normal mode had been called easy, and they had created a normal mode that was like somewhere in between where easy and hard is, right? That would be an actual good normal mode, I think. That would have been fine. But I do think the thing with this game is that hard really forces you to engage with its mechanics, right? You have to use those emblems. You really, like, multiple times over a course of a map, you have to use them, and you have to refresh them, and they will be necessary to your survival, because if you don't, you will be screwed, right? And I think the back half of the game was definitely easier generally, because the first half, you don't have as many abilities. Like, your characters can only use one weapon type usually, because base classes only have one sword or one axe or whatever, whereas when you upgrade your classes, like Chloe, for example, got a healing staff. Same with Ivy. Like, Ivy got access to healing staffs when she got to her advanced class or promotion. People like Alfred, who's kind of useless, like the worst character I had, but I kept using him the whole game, because why not? He finally got access to swords, so he could now break enemies with swords, which was helpful. Like, you get more access and more powerful as the later game happens, which lets you deal with these harder maps, but they aren't as hard because you are more powerful by comparison. So it actually was a bit more balanced, it felt, in the second half of the game. Again, aside from that last map, I think my biggest complaint about this game is it likes reinforcements a bit too much, right? Like, reinforcements make maps in this game so fucking long, because you'll go through, you'll clear people out, and there's like reinforcements, like 5-6 turns of reinforcements, and you're like, okay, I guess I'm just going to deal with these. And sometimes the reinforcements are infinite, because the game is trying to funnel you, right? The game is trying to force you into a path where there's one boss that is like really near the end of the game, where you're slowly going through this chamber, this kind of like this palace, and you're getting all the way to the end, and they start spawning enemies, and I'm like, okay, right before the boss, I'm just going to clear out these reinforcements, and then they just 2 more turns after that, they put even more, and I'm like, okay, I can't deal with there are too many. I literally can't deal with them. So I rewound all the way back to right before that, and I was like, I'm just going to rush the boss, and that's what you have to do. So many situations in this game force you, because it's ironic, Bally, because you're turtley player in every other video game. With Fire Emblem, I am a turtley player. I will very slowly bait people out. I will put my general there. I'll be like, here's my general, come and crash against this wall, essentially, because the general, you put them out there, they have massive defense, and so any physical attackers will just crash against that wall and do 0 damage to a general. So that's what I do. I put them out there, or I put a character like Clan who had a high resistance against magic characters, and again, crash against that wall. They come to me, and then I pick them off as they are closer towards me, right? But this game, in a lot of instances, is like, no, motherfucker, you got to go out there, you've got to put yourself at risk, and you've got to come up with strategies to keep yourself safe, right? Like these things like the chain guard, or like the bonded shield from Lucina's ability to defend enemies even if they're in exposed situations, or Corrin's ability when you pair them with a thief, where they can place down a bunch of fog, and that fog increases your dodge ability for that period of time. So there's loads of little things. It basically forces you to use those more complex mechanics in order to get to a place where you can take on bosses by rushing towards them, right? While still being careful about it. So I appreciated that. As much as it took me out of my comfort zone of where I like to be with Fire Emblem, I appreciate that the game pushes me in that direction. And sometimes they do that with reinforcements. They will just spawn a bunch behind you and be like, run, motherfucker, just run. Just ignore the reinforcements, go in that direction and try and survive, basically. And it's very different from other Fire Emblem games I've played, but I think it brings a lot to the table, and I think the Emblem system generally is really cool and necessary in a way to survive that onslaught. So yeah, I think it's excellent. Again, I spent 85 hours with it, so I clearly like the game quite a bit. I also there are so many other units that can be used in this game that I just didn't use at all. And they've been adding stuff like the DLC, so I might do another playthrough. I might just do a normal playthrough just for breezy fun, in the future, because hard is stressful. It's difficult. So I did enjoy the challenge, but I think if I was to go through it again, I might not do that, or I might just put it on casual. Hard casual seems like a good way to go with this game, because I was playing on classic. I just had to make perfect moves, because otherwise someone just dies. It's at the drop of a hat. It's so easy for people to die. But I finished the game on hard classic with every single person alive, which is, for me, the thing that I'm always shooting for with Fire Emblems. I'm very, very happy that I was able to do that. Great challenge, great game. Really, really loved it. So
nice.
Yeah, Fire Emblem Engage. Check it out if you have not. Bally, you have one more game to talk about.
I do. I've been playing a little game that came out in 2019 on iOS, and then it came to Switch in 2020, and it's a game called Inmost. And we were really taken in by this game from like its reveal trailer, probably back at the start of 2019 or maybe 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that releasing on iOS, I think it released on Apple Arcade first and then was switched later. I just think for the video game circles we listen to, that is like a guaranteed way to kind of miss a beat, as it were, where it kind of just drifts into the ether a little bit. So
right.
It's a bit of a shame that this game wasn't really talked about more, because I thought there was quite a lot of hype. And obviously, like, it is developed by Hidden Layer Games, which are like a small Lithuanian studio, I believe, but it's published by Chucklefish, which is kind of why I think we were so interested.
Totally, yeah.
We were so interested, and it's a really cool game that is a bit rough around the edges, I'd probably say. You can clearly see why Chucklefish wanted to publish it, because it really fits their art style. And
pixel art aesthetic is very much their vibe.
Yes, and this is some of the best like pixel art animation I've really seen. And there's like really good like music and then lighting on top of, like certain pixel art moments story-wise that are just very impactful and feel quite unique. And almost like, when I think of like what are pixel art games that are going for impactful moments, obviously I think of like Eastward, but another one's like To the Moon. It's like it had kind of those kind of vibes at points, even though it's like it's not top down pixel art, it's side on 2D pixel art, but it did kind of have those themes, like. But this game is so much darker than either of those games by like a country mile, and kind of makes me surprised Chucklefish did publish this game, because it is really dark, and there are definitely there are themes around like suicide and murder and all these dark things in this game that obviously I knew it was a dark game. The game plays around with the theme of darkness a lot, but it it kind of links the fantasy ideas of darkness with real world reality of dark ideas, and that's kind of why I think this game is so dark and kind of works in a way. So you have 3 planes of action. Most of the game you spend as like this man who runs around. It's a fairly linear Metroidvania world, and it's kind of like this old house that morphs into like a castle. It's kind of like both, and it's a fairly linear Metroidvania world that then does loop back in on itself. And this little man can't attack or anything. He can just avoid enemies and move things around, and it's more or less puzzle platforming. And then you've got a girl in her house, and she's with like her parents, and it tells a story with her where there's like stuff going on. And then the final plane of action is you play as like this knight or warrior in this dark castle, and his levels are incredibly linear focused levels, and there's very basic action and combat that you can do to defeat enemies, and that's it. You spend the vast majority, you maybe spend like 3/4 of the game, I'd say, with the man, and then you spend like a fraction of that with the girl, and then another fraction of that with the knight. Like you spend most of the time in the kind of general Metroidvania.
So
world.
Do you kind of like get to sections in that Metroidvania space that then shift over to another perspective and then back again? Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah, it constantly shifts. You reach a checkpoint, and then it's like, right, now we're going to do the story beat and cut to this, or then story beat, cut to this. And the 3 planes of action do link up, but I won't reveal how. And that's part of the game. Kind of like there's a lot of reveals and things which are done quite well in my opinion, but it's really the atmosphere and the vibes of this game that are really impressive. So something like, if you remember the SAX, obviously in Metroid,
of course,
Fusion,
how could you forget?
There's a lot of like creepy stuff chasing you in this game, and like I need to make it around this corner before this thing and like, oh my god, I didn't see that thing and now it's chasing me, and you're playing a lot of those parts as this man who is powerless to like,
right,
so you have to find like nooks and crannies to hide in, and then they might jump past you and jump into some spikes and kill themselves by accident, kind of thing.
Is this the closest to a survival horror game you've played, Bally?
Oh yeah, this game is dark. Like, it is scary, and it's just, it was pretty dark to play. I thought about it for a long time after playing it, for sure. And yeah, you kind of just keep going with the guy, and then stuff happens, and then it becomes a lot more clear what's happening with the girl and how that links to the knight and how the knight links to the guy, and there's just some really big reveals at the end. I will admit I did have to just check in with like a kind of like a story update on YouTube afterwards.
What happened?
Just to clarify a couple of points, but you know, with your literary brain, then we said you're probably gonna predict all these things happening, sure. And yeah, I would really recommend this. It's only about a 3 to 4 hour game. There is definitely some clunky level design where, yes, the Metroidvania world loops back on itself, but there was a couple of points where I really had no idea where I was meant to go, and where the vast majority of the game is quite linear and guides you. There's a couple of points where they're like, okay, now you have to go all the way back to this thing. And you think, oh god, right, yeah, I do. But then it's a short enough game. I do this with short, tricky games sometimes. I just look up the full game on YouTube, and I'll just like skip along, see what they did, and then, okay, right, that's what you do, and continued on. I had to do that like maybe 3-4 times.
Okay.
So I don't think it's the most elegant puzzle platforming design all the time, but there is some really nice stuff in there. But this game's not as much about that stuff. I'd say it's more about the themes, the vibes, the message it's trying to get across. I'm not really sure of the message it was trying to get across by the end of the game, and having watched the story stuff. But I thought this is quite a unique game in kind of like, this is a unique way of telling a story like this in a video game space that I was quite impressed by. It's a little the action with the knight is incredibly simplistic. He doesn't have like loads of combos or anything. It's very simplistic, very linear. But again, those areas are so short that you just kind of roll with it. And you, like I said, you spend most of the time with the man, and it's a cool game. Like, this had the potential to be a proper solid 8-9 out of 10, and I'd take it down to like a 7 because of some of the clunkiness, but it's still definitely worth checking out. So if you see it on sale on Switch sometime, I'd recommend checking it out. Like 3 to 4 hours. worth your time. Be prepared for some of the darker themes, though. I'll definitely warn you of that. And I don't think the game does a good job of warning you of that. I think it tells you. Right. I think it gives like some sort of thing at the end of the game saying, if you need support, check out this. It's like you could have said that at the start. Or the
why would you do that at the end? Yeah.
Weird. I think the save system is also incredibly clunky, so I'd highly recommend just trying to play it in a couple of sessions and with your Switch and sleep mode. It's just really clunky menus for some reason. Really rough around the edges and points, but a very cool game.
Yeah, I kind of see why it was hard to market this game now, you talking about it, because it's like, it's hard to almost kind of define it in a way, it seems.
I mean, the designers definitely had a very clear vision in their head of this does this, and it links to this in this way, and we're going to do this by doing, and I can imagine sitting down with someone wanting to edit a trailer thinking, what the hell are we meant to how
do we convey this, right? Because it's like a stealth Metroidvania with narrative elements that also has a combat part that's only a small part of it.
Exactly. And going into it, I had so little idea what you actually did in this game. I thought it was just puzzle platforming, and
as much as we had followed this game, I still didn't really know what Inmost was, if I'm honest.
And it did get good reviews, even though it didn't create much hype. I think it's sitting on like an 80 on OpenCritic, so like I was definitely up for checking it out. So it's cool. It is cool. I am surprised Chucklefish were up for backing this thing, knowing how sprightly and positive most of their other games seem to be. But I guess they fell in love with that pixel art, which I must admit I did as well. I think it's very impressive what they do in this game.
Awesome. Very, very cool. I definitely want to check that out at some point. Just need to play 700 games first. I'll get there.
It's a short game. It's only 3 hours.
That's nice. Awesome. Well, that is going to close us out for the show. It's going to be us heading on off. But before we go, let's shout out some stuff. Bally, no emails this week, but we will probably return to those next time. So why don't you give a shout out for people to send their emails in? Where can they send them to?
Yes, please send your emails to thisnintendolife@gmail.com. That's thisnintendolife@gmail.com. We always appreciate more.
Yeah, absolutely. So get those going. We also have some folks to thank, people who support us on patreon.com/thisnintendolife. Who do we have to thank this week, Bally?
We have a brand new patron, Callista R. Thank you so much for your support, and thank you to our $10 tier patrons. They are Zach S, Thomas, Matthew, Albert, and Wicked Gamer UK Alan. Thank you so much for your support. And thank you to all of our other patrons. If I didn't say it last time, I think we did cross the 50 mark, which is awesome to see. So thank you to all 50 of you out there. It's hugely appreciated, the support you give the show, and hope you enjoy the extra content.
Absolutely. You can obviously find us and the show in various places. We're still on Twitter at TNL Podcast. You can follow there.
Still on Twitter for now.
Still on Twitter, even though it broke during the direct and was telling me you can't tweet. You've tweeted enough for today. I was like, Elon Musk, fuck off. Just leave me alone.
I have to share my views on the direct.
Yeah, exactly. So that wasn't great. But we're still there. You can follow me at LordNBZ. Where can they find you, Bally?
I'm on Twitter at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91.
Lovely stuff. You can find the show in various places. We're on Spotify, we're on Stitcher. You can download us in a podcatching app. Just search for This Nintendo Life, subscribe, find us there. That would be great. You can also review us on Spotify. You can review us on Apple Podcasts. Both of those really helpful to broaden the reach of the show, and more people can find some folks talking about Nintendo stuff. That's us here talking about Nintendo Directs and all the fun games we've been playing. So do review us, and that would really, really help and help us grow the show, which would be very, very nice. And I think that's it. I missed anything? I think so.
I'm just excited for Octopath Traveler 2. That's what.
It's good promise. Good promise of that. I was talking to you about this. I was like, should I just buy a Switch OLED for Breath of the Wild, for Tears of the Kingdom? I'm going to Japan. I'm going to be playing on a plane. I just heard also my sister has apparently lost my charger in her travels in Argentina, unsurprisingly. So she's gonna have to pay me for a new one. It's just how it's gonna be. So I'm gonna need one of those. God. So she almost lost the Kindle as well. My old Kindle.
How can you just lose the thing?
Look, she just loses stuff, man. I don't know. She's in Argentina. Who knows what's going on over there? You know, crazy stuff. So yeah, that's a fun time. Yeah. Cool. Well, that'll do us. Thanks everybody for listening. We'll be back in a couple of weeks' time with some more video game chatter. Until then, we'll see you soon. Bye-bye, folks. The musical interlude used on today's show was Decisive Battle 2 from Octopath Traveler 2. Copyright Square Enix 2023.